Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Pravin Habu from Amani, Africa. I work as a researcher there, and it's good to see all of you from all corners of the world, from within and outside. I'd like to welcome my colleague, Tefsehet from Amani, Africa as well, to do the opening remarks. Tefsehet.
Okay, thank you, Previn. I'd also like to say good morning. Welcome to this Continental Multi-Stakeholder Strategy meeting, convened under the African Union's theme of the year, Justice for Africans and People of African Descent Through Reparations. My name is Tefset Hailu. I'm a researcher at Amani Africa. Today, we gather in Addis Ababa. It's a city that stands as a symbol of African unity and resilience to embark on a journey of reflection, collaboration, and action. This is not just another meeting. It's an opportunity to address one of the most pressing moral and political imperatives of our time, which is reparative justice. The theme of this year, as declared by the African Union, calls on us to confront the enduring legacies of enslavement, colonialism, apartheid, injustices that have left deep scars on our continent and its diaspora. These are not just historical wrongs, they are systemic realities that continue to shape economic disparities, racial inequalities, and global power structures today. In a recent speech, in a meeting organized by Amani Africa and ECOSOC, our director, Dr. Solomon Derso, emphasized that we are not discussing a so-called slave trade. He also highlighted that the term falsely implies that those taken from Africa were mere commodities. They were human beings who were forcefully enslaved and stripped of their identities, cultures, and dignities. Their descendants still live under the shadows of economic disparities, racial injustice, and systemic inequalities, realities that continue to define global power structures today. So, as we gather here today, this conference is also about remembering those whose lives were stolen, whose identities were erased, and whose communities were fractured. But memory is not just about the past. It's about our present and our future. For instance, the arbitrary demarcation of borders by colonizers contributed to political fragmentation, dividing pre-existing ethnic and tribal lands. This frequently resulted in political instability and enduring conflicts that persisted to this day. A notable quote comes from Ta-Nehisi Coates, a prominent writer and advocate for reparations, who stated, "What I am talking about is more than a recompense for past injustices, more than a handout, a payoff, hush money, or a reluctant bribe. What I'm talking about is a national reckoning that would lead to spiritual renewal. Indeed, justice through reparations is not charity. It's not an act of benevolence. It's a matter of rights and accountability. It's about closing the gap between the lived realities of Africans and people of African descent and the promises of international human rights frameworks." This conference is a call to action. It's a call to deepen our understanding of the policy and institutional frameworks needed to advance reparative justice. It's a call to foster synergy among stakeholders, governments, civil society, academia, and international partners to ensure that our efforts are coordinated, impactful, and transformative. And it is a call to map out the stakeholders who have the influence and interest to drive the agenda forward. So today here, I'd like to take a moment to express my gratitude to our partners, particularly the Open Society Foundation, for their invaluable support in convening this critical dialogue and for their past collaboration with us. I would also extend my appreciation to all stakeholders here today, whose dedication to justice and equity brings us together. Let us approach today's discussions with a spirit of collaboration, urgency, and hope. Let us leave this conference not only with a deep understanding of the challenges, but also with a clear roadmap for action, a roadmap that will guide us towards a future where justice through reparation is not just a dream, but a reality. Thank you, and let us begin this important work together.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to see very old friends, but also new friends around in this market that we call the African Union. So thanks to our colleagues from Amani Africa for hosting us. We are very grateful for all your effort to put this meeting together. Thanks a lot. My name is Desiree Asogbavi. I work for Open Society Foundation. I'm based in Dakar. And we are happy to have this discussion together with you. We want it to be very informal. So I haven't seen any protocol to be observed here, so bear with me. So we basically discussing as a family. So we know that many colleagues from different organizations have been working on the issue of reparation for a while. Either inside the AU process or outside, we know that organizations in Africa and beyond have been working on reparations. And those efforts led to various gatherings and to the latest adoption by the AU that this year, 2025, will be dedicated to reparation. And we also know, again, from different submissions, even if you look at the various meetings that happened since the beginning of the week, I was in a symposium yesterday, discussion with ISS and diplomats. We all hear and believe that working on the reparations is not going to be just a series of activities, meetings, discussion, then we go back home. We basically believe that it's going to be a movement to move, to become something very impactful, so we can claim what we are looking for, we can reach what we are looking for. So in that context, and knowing that many organizations have been working on the issue, it came to our mind to bring colleagues together to see how do we create a synergy instead of every organization at different level doing their own things on reparation. If you really want to reach an impact, why don't we sit down together so every colleague share what is in their plan? And we know many of you have planned on it. So we share and we see how we can, what are the best mechanisms for us to put our resources together, our mind together, working with diaspora, people of African descent outside of the continent, so we can, reach the impact we are looking for. And then we host a call a few weeks back to share this idea. And we're happy that most of the participants in the call, and I know many of you were on that call, support the idea of using the opportunity of the EU Summit to sit down together and discuss how we can work together towards the theme of the year. And one of the reasons actually of doing so is that everybody's seeing the reparation issue from different angles. And we have different capacity. and we need to make sure that we don't miss any of the facets of the reparations. So it's also a good reason for us to get that. So we're making sure that all aspects of reparations are dealt with in this movement we really, really want to make happen. And maybe lastly, to mention that, of course, AU say it's 2025, but nobody believes that the job will be done in a year. I think we're just launching it. This is something we're going to face a lot of resistance, I'm sure you know, in what we are claiming for. So it's not something we're going to see happen even in the AU. Like, look at the reality. The new leadership, a new leadership is coming in the AU. They'll be elected during this summit, and they won't be in functions before the end of March. So when they come, new people, they have to settle in and everything. Like, before you know, we're already half of the year. So when are they going to start and finish reparation by the end of 2025? This is basically not going to happen. Do we need to push for an extension of the dedication of the Continental body on the reparation issue? Is a question we should ask. Should we ask for more so that attention are focused on the issues? I know that talking about AU Team of the Year, from our experience, after the year, nobody talk about it anymore. But we have to make sure that we keep the momentum very high and very live going on. So those are some of the things that we really wanted to discuss as we gather here. And again, I want to thank you very much for making your time to come and accepting these invitations to do it. So very practically talking, this is the three things that we are expecting basically to achieve at the end of this day. So number one, we really want to deepen the discussion on the policy and institutional frameworks that are necessary for implementing the reparative justice across various teams. That's one of the three things we really want to achieve today. And then number two, we really want to foster synergy to enhance our collaboration among the various stakeholders, looking at the issue from different angles on how we deploy the team together. And at the end of the day, we hope that we'll be able to articulate a plan of actions. I'm looking at Professor Tim, who promised to do a miracle and pull out of people here the best that they have so we can come up with a plan, a strong one, and also mechanism by which we can work together to deploy this plan. So we are hoping that we'll be able to articulate a plan of action that leverage the team and how we do it. And of course, working on reparation is going to need resource. We also have the opportunity to see where do we find the resource to make it happen? Who else do we bring in the basket? I think this is not something we can run away from. And this is basically the way we envisage the day today. So I'm going to stop here and invite Prof to take over for the rest of the program. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Desiree Asogbavi with Open Society Foundations. And those of you who don't know Desiree, he's been working in Addis Ababa for quite a long time, from 2006 to 2019. He was head of the Oxfam Pan-Africa office, which was engaging the African Union. And he created platforms for civil society actors who were coming into Addis to engage the African Union. So he's really an old hand, even though he looks like a young man. And he's left a legacy. So now he's with the philanthropic organizations. So he's on the other side of the equation. And he's looking to see how he can support us, all of us here today, to enable us to engage with the theme of the year. So that's who he is. I just wanted to include that introduction. We will do a round of introduction. There's quite a few of us in this room. And I'll ask you to briefly introduce yourself, your organization, And then we will have a second round where you can just describe how you're engaging the theme of the year from your perspective. And maybe if you already want to share the areas you're working in, you can do so. And then after lunch, we will have 2 working groups that will break and actually really begin to distill almost a template or a matrix of organizations working in different areas to see how it all fits and how we can share. The spirit here is one of sharing, not competition, cooperation. So we have to be working in a collaborative mindset. And we even had a discussion briefly about creating at least the framing of trying to brand this construct we have here, this grouping, as the Pan-African Reparations Consortium. Just an idea to think about. We thought about network, but we've seen many networks rise up, fall down. And we thought consortium gives us a very action-oriented approach to also engaging potential partners that we will be soliciting in the future. So that's the plan. And I think the first session is going to run from now until 12:30. And then we'll have lunch, and then we'll come from 1:30 until 2:30 or 3:30 or so. Let me introduce myself. I don't think I've done a good job in introducing myself. I am Tim Murithi. I am with the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, based in Cape Town, Kenyan, living in South Africa for the last 20 years. I also was in Addis in 2007, 2009. We helped to establish the Institute for Security Studies office here in Addis Ababa to work on peace and security issues relating to the African Union. So that is a little bit of my background, and it's very short. So it gives you an example of how short and sweet we want your introductions to be. That the time for speeches will come, please. So just a quick round of introduction, because quite a lot of people in the room today. And maybe we will ask you to stand, because some look so comfortable, they just want to, enter the zone of engagement.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Great to be in Addis. I am Elisa Mbiza from the Gender is My Agenda campaign network, commonly known as GMAC. We work on gender issues, but in the last 5 years, we've also created a platform where young people, we started with young women, would engage in policy issues, but now we opened up to the allies, the youth of Africa. So both female and male now engage with us in this policy platform. Thank you. I'll hand over to my colleague, Kumba.
Merci, Elisa. Thank you. Good morning and bonjour for some, if we have francophones in the room. Glad to see you, Tim, again. Do you recognize me? I did not till you present yourself. Glad to see faces. And thank you. My name is Kumba Fall from Senegal. I'm the Executive Director of Farm Africa Solidarité, the coordinator of GMAC. And we thank really OSF for inviting us to be part of the journey. Thank you. So first work on women, peace and security. And our chair, our president, founding president is the current African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, Madam Diop. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sandra. I'm from the Foreign Office, UK Foreign Office, and I cover the African Union.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Frances Jacks. I'm the Development Counsellor in the UK Office to the African Union. We're here because, as we've said in other fora, we're very keen to be involved in this conversation and to engage constructively with all the issues. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Cecile Johnson. I'm originally from Jamaica, but I'm also here representing African Development Plan. I'm the CEO and founder of it, and I'm coming out of Illinois, Chicago, Illinois, and I focus on self-determination for the African American. I also do data on us. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Philip Bonkungu. I work with the CISA at the African Union. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Mistru. I'm working for Peace First Ethiopia. We are promoting peace and development in the country. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Sarait. Working for education in a rural area in the last 10 years. Thank you, sir.
Nsumba, Salamta to Nastalin, greetings. My name is Sipiwe Baleka. I serve as the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa. I also serve on the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America International Affairs Commission, and I'm the coordinator of the Lineage Restoration Movement, which represents the 800,000 Black people in the United States that have taken the African ancestry DNA test to find out who they come from in Africa. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I am Rosy Rodriguez. I am the multilateral attaché from the Embassy of Mexico, and we have our own story to tell in regards of our descendancy. We are making a big effort to recognize that past that is our third line of origin, and also we have some experiences that we're happy to share in the matters of reparation. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Abisalom Samson Yosef is my name. I am fellow at Institute for Economics and Peace and also trainer at Makerere University, peace building and conflict resolution expert.
Thank you very much. My name is Kadus. I'm a co-founder and current lead of Lega Vision initiatives that we are currently working on education and advancing the way of we give education for our young youth. So thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thank you very much. My name is Ambassador Afolabi Oke. Work for African Union 6th region. We're responsible for the global diaspora. So we're happy to add a lot of value to this conversation because this is all about the 6th region. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ambassador Lavina with my fellow ambassador, part of African Union 6th region. Global, which is obviously pretty much the core of, as he mentioned, in terms of the theme of the year. So looking forward to quite an effective discussion today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mebe Getachew. I am here as an independent consultant. I am a peace and security expert. But thank you. Good to see everyone.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Zannaba Gitana. I'm working on ETO skill, which emphasizes on women's and youngsters peace building on a scale. That is, I am here to attend.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mabita Safa. I'm a journalist working for Pan-African Daily TV. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Deborah Ermias. I'm currently a student studying social work and international relations. I'm currently not working with any organization. I used to work with women rights spaces, CSOs, and youth empowerment CSOs. So I'm currently volunteering and kind of freelancing. Thank you. I'm great. I'm excited to be here and learn from you all. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Henrietta Ikefre. I'm a legal advisor at Africa Judges and Jurists Forum, and I manage the Africa Reparations Program. Happy to be here.
Merci. Bonjour, good morning. I'm Madame Bebon Viviane from the Cameroon Embassy. I'm happy to be here to discuss about the theme of the year. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Aidan from Indarase Youth Association as a public relation. I have a background of nursing class, but I have a passion for communication, advocacy, and youth empowerment, and I'm really excited to be a part of this discussion.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone. My name is Abubakar. I'm the Deputy Ambassador of the Embassy of the Republic of Guinea in Addis and covering the Eastern African areas. Thank you. We are in this together.
Good morning. I'm Rosa Magua.
government relation, African Union officer, public and international officer, latter-day Saint charities. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Akwa Kolani. I am the Executive Director of YAMG, a local NGO that works on the youth. We've been working in justice for the past years on the area of transitional justice across Ethiopia. So I'm hoping this event to be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Fatuma, and I'm the co-founder and the executive director of a startup organization called Empowering African Voices, which is dedicated to empower, advocate, and protect the marginalized African women and the children across the continent. And I'm also the program director of a local organization based in Somalia called Safe Marginalized and Minorities in Somalia. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kalkita Angrima. Currently, I'm a student volunteering for SOS, different kinds of youth organization. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lamratul Seged. I'm from the Canadian Mission to the African Union. I'm the political officer there. I bring greetings from our ambassador. I'm here to listen in on these engaging conversations, taking into account Canada's Indigenous history and our national efforts at truth and reconciliation, as well as our vibrant 1 million strong Afro-descendant population. So I'm just here to listen in and sort of lend a supporting hand. Thank you.
Salam, greetings. This is Tarafa. I'm working in Fana Media Corporation, one of the member of the BRICS Media Hub. I'm a researcher, historian, and heritage practitioner, and I'm currently producing and presenting Caribou Africa TV show. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to you all. My name is Michael. I'm here on behalf of the Australian Embassy here in Ethiopia. I'm pretty much focused on public diplomacy and policy issues at the embassy, and it's really my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dimas Makua. I deal with international relations at the African Union on behalf of Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints charities, among other things. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ibrahim Assal from Gambia, living in Senegal, and I'm the Executive Director of Trust Africa, which is a Pan-African foundation based in Senegal.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Liliane Mobiei. I'm the co-founder and director of African Futures Lab, which is an organization that whose mission is to hold states and private actors accountable for historical and contemporary racial injustices across Europe and Africa. And we do that through research and advocacy. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Mahmoud Kamara, and I'm the founder of Reform Initiatives. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Tadde Sesame Meteke from Institute for Security Studies. I am a senior researcher on transitional justice. Okay.
Good morning, all. My name is Mabo Zorpa. I'm from Namibia, representing the Nama Traditional Leaders Association.
Good morning. My name's Kim Poole. I'm an artist. I'm the founder of the Teaching Artists Institute. We work at the intersection of art healing and reparatory justice.
Good morning. My name is Alan Gari. I'm the Africa Advocacy Director at Human Rights Watch. Really a pleasure to be here and looking forward to the discussions.
Good morning. My name is Richard Sewachirianga. I'm the Emeritus Presiding Officer for AU Economic, Social and Cultural Council, and also Executive Director of Center for Basic Research in Uganda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Esther Wanjiru Muigai Mnaro. I work for Pan-African Lawyers Union as a program manager in the Office of the CEO.
Good morning, Briggs Bomba. I am with Trust Africa. I'm the Director of Programs, and I may share a little bit about who we are.
Morning, everyone. My name is Ruth Ogberekon with the Pan-African Lawyers Union, popularly known as PALU. I run PALU's portfolio on reparations and restitutions in Africa.
Good morning, everyone. I am Andrew Songa from Kenya, and I am a member of the Reference Group for Transitional Justice in Africa.
Good morning, everybody. My name is George Kegoro. I work on advocacy within the Open Society Foundations. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kenneth Wabaraga, Kenneth for short. I represent Crisis Action. I'm the Advocacy and Campaigns Manager. Crisis Action works on prevention of conflicts and protection of civilians in conflict settings, including in Africa and elsewhere as well. We particularly focus now on Sudan and DRC.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for your introductions, to hear some of the incredible work that a lot of you are doing. Oh, we have a late arrival. Please pass the mic back to our sister there.
You know, as women, we always want to demand the mic. So I wanted to be counted. My name is Brenda Mofia. I am from Zambia. I am the UN representative for Oxfam International. So I'm based in New York. I'm spearheading Oxfam's advocacy and influencing initiatives and efforts in New York. And currently, much of our effort is on the UN Security Council, and we're demanding for the reform of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Everybody has spoken, I hope. Brenda forgot to mention that she also used to work with the African Union. So she has an insider perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all again for your introduction. A remarkable and impressive array of organizations. I have to say, we were not expecting this many people, which is a good thing. And I think I should invite you to give yourselves just a round of applause for the work you're doing now. We acknowledge that. We salute that. So I think the best way for us to proceed forward will be to actually have discussions in our tables, given the large size of this group. We need to figure out a strategy for our brothers and sisters who are sitting on the chairs behind. We can either join a table or you can convene a small circle. It doesn't matter which option you choose. I recognize Ruth. Ruth is, in fact, supposed to be co-moderating this event with me. So eventually, Ruth, I think you can relocate yourself. So the intention here was not to have elaborate presentations. I think the reason we're here is because we're familiar with the theme of the year. But in case there are one or two colleagues who might not be familiar with the theme of the year, I think in our small discussions at the table, colleagues can share and help others to understand what this policy theme that we have this year is all about. So the first thing we're inviting you to do is actually to, from your own perspective, share what this theme of the year represents to you, a particular insight, and also perhaps one area you think we should focus on. So, insight, an area we should focus on. For the first, let's say, 30 minutes or so. And then the second part of the question is, how, given this large group of people that we have here today, can we work together? How can we work together? In a very concrete and practical manner. Excellent that we have the representation from the African Union. The ambassadors are here. The sixth region is heavily represented. We have the foreign minister of New Africa, which I'm learning about for the first time, which is great. New Africa is coming. And this reparations journey is part of that process to get us there. I think the discussions around the table will also enable us to get to know each other a little bit better. Because if we open up to a huge plenary discussion, I think we won't have enough time for everybody to say something. Ambassador, you concur? 100%. Okay, so that's the way forward. In your tables, what is the theme of the year? You know what the theme of the year is. You're here. What is the key insight you're taking away from it? And how will we work together? Just for now. And then in the afternoon, we'll actually begin to put together that matrix and see which organizations are doing what and how we can try to make it all fit together. And I think that is the African way, in the spirit of Pan-Africanism and Ubuntu. 100%? Is it clear? Okay. Yep. 100%. So the distinguished colleagues lined up against the wall, you need to figure it out if you're going to convene. If you convene yourself in a small circle there, or you can join one of the tables. Also, we can actually exit the room if you want to. Just be back in 45 minutes. We will also summon you. Don't go too far, please. Don't get caught up in all the ministerial discussions, and certainly don't engage in any electioneering. That's a joke. Okay, we have 45 minutes. Please proceed. There is an invitation to join this table if you would like to join. Yes. Please identify a rapporteur for the table. Please identify someone to share feedback with us. I forgot to mention.
Excuse. There's a table here. They need 2 more people. So 2 more people. Also here.
Hello, everyone. If I may grab your attention for 1 minute, a few housekeeping. So in the interest of the schedule and moving along as planned, we are dividing this segment into 2 parts, with the first part having a time allocated of 45 minutes. And so just to say that the guiding questions are here, you feel free to come up to check, and we will go back into plenary at 11:40, actually. Yeah, all right.
In terms of peace and security agenda, we would like to see to address the colonial roots of the contemporary conflicts in terms of borders, in terms of also the land issues, the different factors that feed the contemporary conflicts all over Africa. Economic, so that was like a big one on the table. So we have multiple demands on that. The reform of international financial institutions, World Bank, IMF, WTO, and also the UN Security Council. Debt cancellation, debt architecture, I would say, to be more precise. Gender, it's also like a big theme for us. How we make sure that the reparations agenda is structured around like gender harms, gender violence that was done during colonial times and is still in its legacy today. and also to address the culture of impunity that is that concerns like this gender-based violence. And of course, climate, we know that it's a core issue at the moment. And full solutions proposed by the Global North in terms of carbon credits, all these funny solutions, and ask for climate reparations, and most importantly, change the narrative to climate reparations. So in terms of what we can, how we can work together, maybe some suggestions that were on the table is that to have collaborative platforms like this, to know who is doing what and what are the activities that are planned, how we can put our, collaborate, see each other and understand what others people are, what they are working on. Also have cluster groups in these platforms. If there are maybe cluster on media, cluster on economics, a cluster on gender. So we have groups that can dive deep into in specific thematics. We also see a kind of big campaign, I think, on reparations to also reach, go beyond the circles here, the usual suspects who work on reparations, but to speak to ordinary citizens so they can understand, like, what do we mean by reparations and how does it affect them in their everyday life. And from the perspective of the UK government, I think what the people who are here, they can say is that UK is still reflecting on its position on reparations. So they are still thinking like what reparations could mean and what form it can take. That's one thing. And maybe one proposition that was put on the table is that how can they approach the different, I don't know if they were the platform, the states, but the different people, and understand what kind of reparations is needed. So that's, colleagues, I don't know if you want to jump in and if I respect the spirit of the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Lillian. And extra thank you for sticking to exactly 6 minutes and some seconds. So excellent, great time management. I didn't even have to use my 1 minute left sign. I think that was very good. And I think this table particularly, because I sat with them for a bit, was very interesting because they had representatives from both sides of the reparations conversation. And I think that went very well. And thank you very much for the amazing and excellent summary. I think I will go on to table 2. If we could pass the microphone. Cecile, you might want to come up, or you can just stand, where you are. Okay.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Cecile. I'm from table 2. If you can hear me, please don't worry if you can't see me, okay? So our table was very interested. We spoke on many issues. We talked about the concept of self-determination for the African descendant in the US. The decolonization was written to exclude us Black people in the Americas. Right to return, Africa and citizenship, how to work together. Another person spoke about being born in Lake Tana, a source of the Blue Nile, and advocated peace and development, environmental protection, teaching youth about nature, planting trees. He made a very important point that many of the conflict in Ethiopia was about power and money, and every 30 years the cycle seemed to repeat. So even though Ethiopia is known as never been colonized, somebody makes sure that there's always an issue. So when we talked about, another person was coming out of security, AU Security and Intel, and he said he really needed to know more about this issue of reparations. So everyone did not understand the issue of reparations, so we explained a little bit about that. And so knowledge about the situation on the ground would be good, and awareness of the history and perspectives of countries that have had histories of slavery. Many people didn't know, right? How to get the youth to work together, creating awareness about youth to stop them from being used as tools in violence. And we noticed that many times in the conflicts around the continent, that it was the rich who did not participate. It was the poor people's children who were dying. And then what that impact had on the mothers who lost their sons. And no one is talking about the women being victims of that. And the programs on agriculture, in some areas of Ethiopia, that person, he mentioned that they weren't even allowed to, they had so many holidays, 170 holidays for the year, and they were told that the water was holy, so they couldn't use it for agriculture. So the religious implication of what's happening, right? Another young lady talked about, she really knew nothing about reparations, right? So the education of, we all need to be on the same page as to what reparations is, and very concerned about how the youth were not being educated, and there was a lot of joblessness, and that people were being conditioned to actually go to America and other places versus to build Africa. And there was very little knowledge about others, right? We have representation from Canada with the embassy, and they're here to kind of listen and to represent the government of Canada and to give insight on what Canada has done in its program on Indigenous people, and maybe that kind of insight can help us also. So she said there was a lot of knowledge, there was little knowledge, but no depth about Black people in that culture, right? We have another young person who is a researcher from Security Studies think tank, and he wanted to know, how do we practicalize reparations? How far do we go back, and to whom reparations be given, and who is deserving of reparations? Because different Black populations in Africa and overseas actually face different challenges, and so therefore the repair that's needed is going to be different for each person. Another person focused on education in the countryside. This issue of education is very important. 80% of Ethiopians live in the countryside, and many don't have a straight line, nor the educational infrastructure. And so when we talk about reparations, education is a key area that needs to be promoted. So we talked about, how do we work together? We said we need to share our stories. We learned a lot from just talking to each other. The thing is, when we even see state citizenship laws, even people within Africa states are disenfranchised. So we learned that, that some countries have different rules around citizenship. So we in the diaspora, when we say, oh, they're discriminating against us, they even discriminate against their own citizens. So we learned from talking to each other. Unfair trade and the visa restrictions, we talked about that. So those are colonial structures that we kept, and many African countries are just continuing the colonial cycle against each other. We talked about free trade, and that when you hear of trade being done in Africa, we usually think white Chinese or Arab, how hard it is for the African, similar in the Caribbean for the Jamaican or the Caribbean person, or in the United States for the African American to become economically successful, right? But everyone else can come to our areas and be successful. So we saw that that was a common trend amongst all of us. And so this colonial mindset has reproduced superiority. We, the diaspora, sometimes when we come, we don't even realize how colonized we are. And so the approach that we may do may actually turn others off, because we're coming with our colonial structures in our head. And so we realize that it wasn't just us, it was also you in Africa and how you treat your neighbor, okay? And then we've talked about the UN. The US funds the UN, and of course, Trump is going to pull out now, but and how unfair that was. So here was an organization that was supposed to be about a collective making decisions, but you sit on the Security Council and you're one of 7, one can negate 15. And so we see the ramifications. So we felt that we need to focus on the UN and make it fairer to us as Africans by getting permanent veto seats on the UN Security Council. And we also recognize that political will was lacking amongst most of our governments, wherever we are, Black people around the world. Our governments, there's no political will to push a Black agenda for reparations for our people. And so we needed to be able to create a movement that could do that. So we do that by sharing our stories, getting to know more about the issues, being educated on what reparations is, your ideas about how to then implement reparations, right? And then understanding that each area might have had a different colonial experience. And so therefore the healing and the repair that's needed would be a little bit different. And so allowing that flexibility. Have we covered?
Thank you very much, Cecile. And I think we're having a trend here, because I still haven't used my 1 minute left sign yet. Thank you. And I think I'm really glad, because I think Tim had said this initially, that when he was introducing this segment, that some of us may not be as familiar with the topic of reparations as others. And I'm really glad that you guys were able to carve out time to kind of explain what it means for different people. And I can see there's continental African representation on that table, as well as diaspora and African representation on that table as well. So thank you. Thank you so much, Cecile. I would move on to table 3, and I am hearing that the rapporteur is actually my colleague and friend, Esther. 5 to 7 minutes. Maybe you would be the one to allow me use my 1 minute sign.
Well, I hope not, but disclaimer, if there are difficult questions, they should be asked to the other people on the table. So we started by looking at the insights and what we think should be emphasized during this year's theme for the AU. And the first one was more relating to what was discussed yesterday, is how to handle the political pushback that will come with seeking reparations, because as Brian yesterday clearly stated, this is going to be a political battle. So there's need already to be looking into how that will be handled. And then the second thing that we thought about was there must be a look into how reparations should be effective and to ensure that claims are well articulated. So for those who are pushing for reparations, how do we ensure that the claims that the people have, and we have representation from someone from Namibia, and she was explaining what reparations for her people would mean. So how do we ensure that this is covered in the conversation? And then the other thing was that there's need to look into the past AU instruments that already exist and the processes that have been there, for instance, the 2022 Accra Proclamation, and to see if there are existing gaps. Is there a need then to have more policies that speak to this, so that even when it comes to implementation, where reparations are granted, that then this is done well. Then the other thing was the involvement of the community, so that their concerns are addressed and that the government understands that it's only an agency. So it covers also the interest of the people, and to also avoid division. And so going more into avoiding division, we talked about the need to involve those who are affected directly, as well as the bigger population, so that we also don't have division where one party is being bribed to overlook the claims of the other. And the other thing was, how do we frame issues and how do we call for an inward reflection so that colonial legacies do not undermine the rights of the communities seeking reparations? How do we go post what has happened and ensure that, colonialism is not driving the reparations agenda? And then the other thing was that there's need to document and capture the history of reparations, the current processes, the past, and also we look at what the future should look like, so that we already have a roadmap that we can follow towards reparations. Ruth, are you looking at your time? Sorry. And then one other thing that came out, and I'm glad that there are some good funders on this table, was that there's need to have a budget for this meeting so that there's proper record keeping, and that also organizations that are well funded to run the reparations agenda. And then the other thing was to have an overview or a diagram that shows different stakeholders who should be at every table when reparations are being discussed, so that they can enrich to the conversation and there's no one being left behind. There was a point on involving religious leaders. There was, some of us agree, some of us don't agree, but there was the issue that there's probably need to involve religious leaders when it comes to reparations, so that they also look into how religion probably played into the injustices that were committed, and then at the current times, what role can they play towards ensuring that we get reparations? And then when we were having discussions, we had a different analogy, some sort of a non-alignment of one of the stories that we were talking on reparations. And so then there came the point that there's need to align the history and the stories and the narratives that we have, so that as we move ahead on reparations, we have the truth story, and that's what we go with. And then there's also the need to ensure that we have facilitators who can, drive the dialogue and fix any fragmentations that exist. And So the second question, we also put some answers there. I'm almost done, Ruth, sorry. How do we collaborate? And the first was that we need to have a movement. We need to have coordination in that movement. And we need that coordination to have notes on thematic and also on geographical aspects so that everyone is included. And then the other thing, of course, was the issue of we need to leverage on technology. We need to use, for instance, journalists to tell this story. More of digital warriors who can cover the struggle in all aspects. Yeah, I can leave it now to the table to add anything.
You still have 2 minutes, so.
Okay, so I think the only additions were that we had quite a tense discussion, which is that we realize that there are tensions that we have to continuously navigate. One of them is the differences in terms of, some of the historicals that come to this reparation because of their historical understanding and location. The new people who may feel a bit removed, but yet this is a struggle they have to contend with and all that. So I think there was that in the conversation. But I think to also add, I think we got a good term from Kim about building a plane while you fly it, that this is indeed going to be that kind of process where we have to agree that we are flying, but also building, which in a sense means that we have to live with what we have, the limitations we have, even if we have to use the resources that are there and are not there, we continue doing that. But I think that was also the spirit of the discussion, that we are dealing with something that is not a uni-narrative, it has multiple perspectives, and we need to come to it with that level of humility that each one of us will be bringing a certain asset, a certain contribution, but it may be different. But even within that, there will be differences, even in how people understand this question of reparations. And we talked about, as she said, the political struggle that we also have, which is the current one around just within Africa, but also all those who are not on the continent or associated with the continent. Thank you.
So the brother here from Kenya told me that I should add, and I want to do that. We also talked about there being a spectrum of those affected and how we need to really be able to articulate what that spectrum is, to determine and prioritize maybe how and when we apply resources. And as a woman in a diaspora, I feel like I'm the most affected because I don't have any language that's African. I don't have any piece of land. And even as my brothers and sisters, argue and fight about who and how much and why they deserve reparations. Me, I don't even know who to really ask for reparations because I don't have an identity that is directly affiliated with the continent. And though I've built an identity, a culture within a culture, at the end of the day, Trump is still my president. And to me, that has to be the worst offense. Yes.
Thank you very much, Esther, Richard, and Kim. I think your table, you guys went into a lot and discussed, took a multifaceted approach, which I really appreciated. But I would just highlight what Esther had briefly mentioned about international partnerships and allyship, which I'm hoping would be a thematic area that some of the organizations here are going to explore, and which we'll get into more after the lunch break. But I'm happy to leave it at that and move on to, I think the closest to you would be table 7. Mahmoud, you have 5 to 7 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Ruth. I want to say because we were internally displaced, our demand for reparations is that we have extra time.
Actually, on that note, just to briefly share that PALU, Reform Initiatives, AJJF, and other partners who would have to forgive me at this point if the name is not coming, we convened a very important session yesterday that talked about, some of the pathways and how we can amplify and appropriately deploy resources to this agenda. And I think in addition to McMead presenting or rapporteuring for his team, he would also have to wear the hat of briefly summarizing to the people in this room what went down yesterday. So McMead, I would give you 12 minutes.
Yay!
How generous.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ruth. You see, this is why you need to ask. You have to seek and then you can receive, right? We've just already started getting our reparations. So this is an indication, guys, that we need to keep making the demands and we'll get the answers. Our group was also very mixed and was quite energetic, and we had a series of issues. And I'm glad that we have 12 minutes. 5 of that I will use to report back, and I'll try to respect the 7 minutes that has been given for everybody so that we respect the notion of equity in the report back. But the first point that we mentioned that in our group was to answer the question about the insights that we want to take from the year, the theme of the year. Our first point was that we want to see this year as an opportunity to come up with what the AU has actually demanded, a united front for reparatory justice. And I don't want to overstate this, but I think it has been mentioned by the previous speakers and rapporteurs from the different groups, that there needs to be a united front. And this united front can take different shapes. Another form of unity, because the word unity is very central and it keeps coming up in all of the report backs, is to have a unifying reparatory justice language, a unifying language and narrative for reparatory justice. We all know that we're speaking, or we have to look at this theme of the year and the campaign for reparatory justice as preaching from or singing from the same hymn book with different hymns. But the hymn book unifies us. We have different hymns in this hymn book, but we all have to coalesce on a particular narrative and language. We need to also clearly develop and articulate the claim for reparations legally, politically, and morally. That is very important because we heard yesterday from the conversation on the panel that you were on, Ruth and Gretchen, about the need to not just focus on the legal arguments. And Sifiwe also reminded us of that. We need to take advantage of the political, the moral, and the socio-cultural aspects of this campaign and the demands that we're making. The need for coalition, I think I don't want to report that, but it was very strongly emphasized that there are movements within movements. So I think, as Prof mentioned this morning, we need to have a coalition of minds. And a friend of mine from Latin America says it's the solidarity of the oppressed. We need to have a coalition of the oppressed. Putting pressure on our political actors and political leaders for political will. This is important to engender political interest and political will. We mentioned that we are in the phase of the African Renaissance 2.0. And this means that African actors, advocates, and practitioners within the continent need to put pressure on the political leaders and actors to ensure that if they don't have any interest or they're not willing to lead us, we need to put fire behind their other backs or other forms to ensure that they put the pressure where it is required. We have a lot of points. I'm going to just rush through them. We need to activate a joining and active participation of affected communities. We're all here and we can all speak and articulate our points, but we need to ensure that when we're doing so, we bring along or we create the space and the platforms for those who are directly affected. And we're happy to have within our meets our brothers and sisters from the NAMA Traditional Leaders Association, from the Herero and the Landless People's Movement, and yesterday we had from Caroline from the Ojek community. So bringing along our brothers and sisters within the affected communities in this campaign is very important. It helps with legitimacy, it helps with a lot of the direct impacts that they're experiencing. Recognition of the crimes when the crimes are committed so that we don't use the language of the perpetrators and profiteers of these historical crimes and harms. We have to create our own. Well, not create our own, but use a language that is determined by us and not by them. A redefinition of reparations in a way that expands our understanding and the parameters that we use in our demand, so that we are not using the parameters that have been determined by the perpetrators and profiteers of reparation. So we need to get an expansive, or consider an expansive look at the reparatory justice issue, raising consciousness and awareness. You know, we have to build a popular movement, right? Somebody made reference of different movements. Most of us here participated in the apartheid movement, the anti-apartheid movement. How do we ensure that we transform the reparatory justice campaign into something similar, or even more powerful to like the apartheid movement? So that consciousness is really important. I will try and, how am I doing for time, please?
I have 7 minutes still.
How many minutes?
7.
7, okay, I'll take advantage of that. Getting the young people involved, getting youth and young people involved is very important. Developing watchwords. And this is really important in terms of language and narratives, so that when we use words that we own, that can also clearly demonstrate the effects and the scale and scope of the crimes and harms that were committed against us. So that language, the choice of words that we use, we need to have those watchwords. We need to insert those words in the language of the political actors, so that when they're going to negotiate on our behalf in our absence, they're using the words that we have given to them. I think that is mentioned, and I'm just rushing through. The intersectionality of the historical crimes is very important. We need to ensure that we don't fall into the trappings of the divide and conquer, not just politically, geographically, and otherwise, but there is also linguistic dismantling of the language that we use. So we need to ensure that the issues we address, that are intersectional, not just in approach, but also in advocacy. A very important point was brought up by our brother Sifiwe Baleka, which was also supported by other colleagues in the group, was the consolidation of data. Information and data is power. How do we take advantage of the data that is in the diaspora with those that are in the continent to ensure that we present a powerful advocacy case? Because the information is there, right? It's about how we utilize that information to ensure that when we are making our demands to the perpetrators of these historical crimes, we are going with evidence, right? We used to say that in a lot of our advocacy effort. I see this area and the Oxfam people here, evidence-based advocacy. The reparatory justice campaign has to be evidence-based, and we have the evidence. It is about consolidating those evidence with the data that we have to ensure that we articulate them better. And this means bringing that which is outside, or which has been stolen, which we've put together by ourselves, by the diaspora communities, with our intellect within the continent. And I was pleased to have Ibrahima from Trust Africa and others who are working. I don't know if Codestra is here, but it's a really important institution that we need to work with. The power of narrative has already been mentioned. The diaspora call for reparation, for citizenship. I think Cecile mentioned that in our presentation, that we need to undertake what is considered intra-continental reparatory justice. So between and within the continents, while we're still asking for reparations from colleagues. Restitution was a key thing that we also discussed, restitution of our assets and our ancestral leaders and forebears, and then identifying and clarifying the targets of our demands. Really important. People have mentioned the religious groups. The banks, the multinational corporations are important. They were heavily involved in the extraction and exploitation and plunder of our continent. So we need to include them in targeting not just the political leaders, not just the governments. Yeah, so religious institutions played a significant role. A lot of us here went to Catholic schools. We need to re-examine the education that we received from these Catholic schools and the role that the Catholic Church played in the enslavement of our ancestors. So I'll end there and then transition to the report back. How did I do for time, Ruth? I'm looking at Brian. I'm looking at Brian because, but please do give us a round of applause before I transition.
Just to say that you have 2 minutes in total left.
Well, yesterday we convened at the Best Western Premier Hotel, and we were privileged to partner with PALU, with AU ECOSOC, with AJJF, with AFALAB, and with the Minority Rights Group, MRG, to bring to Addis during this very important week our brothers and sisters and colleagues from Burundi, from DR Congo, from Namibia, and from Kenya, to help in amplifying the voices of their campaign that have been undertaken over the years. The event was called Amplifying Voices and Building Alliances, because we wanted to ensure that we created a space and a platform for our brothers and sisters who are directly affected, whether it's by the German genocide or by the extraction and possible abduction of mixed-race children from Burundi and DRC by the Belgians, for them to share their stories with others who might have heard of them, but have not interacted with them. They wanted solidarity, and that call for the need to help them amplify their voices remains. I want to use this platform and opportunity to ask all of us here, if you haven't read or learned about the cases of the Nama people or the Ovaherero people, we have Mabos and Joyce Muzengwa here. Please speak to them when you have a chance, but also read up on them and help in amplifying their voice and their campaigns. If you haven't heard of the Matisse children in DRC and Burundi, please speak to my sister Lillian and my other sister Genevieve, yeah, in this room. And we also had the privilege and support of PALU and AJJF bringing lawyers. We had a very powerful keynote address yesterday from the Honorable Justice from Kenya, who challenged us and invited us as, well, lawyers, not us, the lawyers in the room. I'm not a lawyer. Well, challenged the lawyers and others in the room to work with civil society and other colleagues who are campaigning for reparatory justice to ensure that there is a combination of efforts. There is the solidarity of efforts, there's a coalition, there's a combination, collaboration, and community built around and with these people and with our people in the advancement of reparatory justice and healing within the continent and outside. I'll pause there and I'll ask either Esther or Henrietta to add. I know I don't have enough time. I don't want to overtake, but that's the report back. Thank you very much for your audience, and thank you for giving us our reparations back.
I was going to say, Mahmoud, this is very typical of our leaders. You get power and then you... I think, okay, we can just transition immediately to... No, it's fine. We can transition immediately to Gretchen, who would be representing table 4. Yeah. Me to jump ahead, but because I was going to start with who wants to follow Mahmoud, not me, but evidently it was me. So our table, I guess if there isn't a way to really describe that, I would describe the synergy that rose here was on, yes, the theme of unity has been expressed here. And I really appreciate, yes, the introduction that many of you have stated of identifying what does stand in the way of our unifying power. And so I see that, some of the themes were related to exclusion of youth, exclusion of our faith and our religious institutions and leadership, exclusion of those who are most impacted by economic colonization, poverty that continues to be pushed down in sometimes by the strategies and the institutions that are acted by those who are elite, the exclusion of our knowledge as to who is going to produce the data-driven measures, the specificity of remedies, the ways in which institutions can implement and distribute reparations. We know that many don't believe that we are capable of managing money. And so how can we demonstrate that capacity? And definitely those who are in academia, but also giving us more vision as to how to apply that and create a world where there is a redistribution of power and economic power. There are case studies
and that can be developed specific to cases. And then there is the knowledge that needs to be developed within the leadership of this movement, which was broke down in some ways, in 3 ways related to lawyers, judges, policymakers, grassroots leaders, academics, and most definitely the knowledge and awareness we need to build within our own personal relationships, our relationships with ourselves, and challenging the colonization of our own minds, our ways of thinking what's possible, and our relationships with each other as to adopting competition instead of this this essence of the value of individualism and separation. And so that brought us back to the theme of working together. I wanted to offer just a few examples of what some of the partners at the table spoke to. How am I on time? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So specifically, we had a powerhouse of folks here. And we're really talking about knowledge production and how we need to have those studies. We have Oxfam at this table. I encourage you all to continue that conversation, as well as with the African judges and jurists. There's production relating to many of the different instruments that have been coming out relating to the AU. Reform initiatives has also been partnering with those, but also specific white papers that have been produced and may be produced from AJJF, as well as training. There was also just the description about reporting on better humanity. Can you state the title again? I don't. The report and the studies of specifically like how we can operate with a better humanity. I'm slaughtering it. You were going to get back to you on that. I'm sorry if the title was not right, but we having local folks from the Ethiopian National Youth Council, as well as those working with awareness and mindset growth, they had very specific action steps for us. I love these, y'all. It's one, listen to what we got to bring. First, listen to what we know we can bring. Second, believe us. Engage us as partners that are going to be able to transfer the deep knowledge and experience of the existing and past generations forward. This cheesiness of they're our future, they're the sustainability of our goals, if you want to be really transactional about it. And so the listening is not just incorporated in leadership of feedback. Who's running for the AU right now? How many youth are engaged at the PRC? And then how do we define power, which at this moment, with the power of those who are young in this continent, they're redefining power. They are redefining the structure of governance that is going to draw upon and build and evolve the values that are held here. So capacitate was the last, which ties into the knowledge building that we all spoke of. What was wonderful that there were individuals here in leadership of faith communities, recognizing this actually starts with one. And we all have the capacity within tapping on our own spirituality, and felt like they kept pushing them and be like, what's the name of the organization you're representing? No, it is the importance for us to bring ourselves into this conversation. I really think that that was a gift to the table, but also building associations, because that's the goal, to learn, to bring back to congregations, our faith communities, as to, yes, this is a moral question as well. Where do our values align with what movement makers are pursuing? How can we move from this charitable model that one is actually about structural, and therefore faith communities need to be there. I'm past, aren't I? Can I get just a fantastic, thank you. Well, I'd like to take that mode. Oh, I'm so sorry, Secretary. So the first Secretary of the UN Ambassador of Cameroon is at our table and provides us such an amazing vision of the unification of regions, which has been spoken to here today. How we can see both African, continental,
our peoples and living in and raised and born within the African continent, and our people who have been raised within and living within, or have lived extensively enough that it has changed and enculturated our mindset in the diaspora. There actually has to be a lot of engagement and knowledge about the differences and the perceptions about the colonization of the continental mind and the colonization of the diasporic mind. And how can we unpack that? That is part of the relationship building. We can't avoid that issue anymore. It needs to be discussed to eliminate the power differences that are not spoken of and the discrimination that is beginning to be spoken of. And then also in building a legal framework. So appreciated the Secretary sharing us the consideration of building a framework within the AU that is specifically addressing discrimination and oppression. We know that there are definitely the offices that have been identified to advance the objectives and the interests of the sixth region. It was powerful to hear this coming from someone who is not from that region as to what the responsibilities are for the continent to be able to advance that. Anything I missed, y'all?
Thank you. Thank you, Gretchen. I think that as we go further along the table and we keep hearing feedback, there is something I want to point out, that the conversation seems to be very interconnected, because Gretchen's table discussed education and narrative building and capacity, all of which had come up in several of the other tables that we heard from before. So thank you, Gretchen, for that. I would move on to, I think, table 5. We have Ambassador Okay rapporteuring. Yes.
Thank you very much. We have quite a lot to share, so I'm going to be going through my notes as quickly as possible. I think we have a fantastic candidates on our table. Please, a round of applause for these gentlemen and ladies. Okay, very quickly, I think my time starts now. If I don't ask, I hope I can get 2 extra minutes. Okay, so the key thing here is the first that our response is really looking at what are the areas that we need to emphasize. One of the areas we looked at, or some of the areas, is historical and moral basis for reparation. Okay. And this is very key because reparations are not just about financial compensation, but about justice, acknowledgement, and restoration of dignity for the African people. And a lot of the cultural heritage artifacts, what our team called cultural patrimony, as it were, these are things that's owned by Africans, and there should not be any discussion about it. It should be returned to where it belongs. And I think that is what is important. We have, someone noted that we even have skulls and skeletons of some of our African leaders in museums being exhibited. We should have a legal framework around returning this to where it truly belongs, which is Africa. This tells also about our dignity. I think the next point is reparation as a developmental imperative. This is important to us because African nations must truly unite in calling for reparation, as Caribbean nations have, through CARICOM Reparation Commission, have done that as well. But what is key is reparation should fund a lot of other things like education, healthcare, economic empowerment, and infrastructure development in Africa and the diaspora. There's a lot of human capital resources, obviously, connecting historical knowledge and creating space for creative economy. So this really should be emphasized. Number 3 is the role of the African Union 6 region, which I belong. The AU6R truly represent the African diaspora, which is central to the reparation movement. So we believe that AU6 region should lead policy advocacy, international lobbying, and diaspora mobilization in pushing for reparatory justice. This is very, very important. And AU can work to create action plans, facilitate knowledge exchange and ensure diaspora voices are heard in African decisions making. 4, legal and policy framework, it's also for reparation is very critical. There is a United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent, which spanned from 2015 to 2024, which ended last year. We believe that this should be extended and backed by stronger enforcement because from our statistics, Ghana took advantage of that in 2019 and they got a lot of benefits, but there are a few countries, including my country, Nigeria, that have not signed up to that. I think it's something that should be enforced in the summit and should be mandated for all because there are loads and loads of benefits as far as that declaration is concerned. So another thing that we also discuss is empowering and recreating the narrative, okay, the narrative of all that we stand for when it comes to reparation, diaspora contribution and restitution is something that we should emphasize. Number 5, reconnecting the diaspora to Africa. Reparation should also involve pathways for citizenship, land ownership, and business investments for diaspora. Okay, and this is very important. Someone mentioned the movie Wakanda Forever. That movie has really resonated with a lot of us Africans, but I think we should create more of that which resonates with us. So summary of that first point is reparation about justice, not charity. Reparation should be transformative. The diaspora is key to Africa's future. African government must unite and reparation must lead to African economic independence. I think that's critical. The second point is practical ways to collaborate on the AU theme of the year. Number 1, it should be policy advocacy and engagement. That means we can develop a paper on reparation, work with AU member states, CARICOM, UN, and diaspora organizations to draft a reparation policy framework. This is very important. We need to host high-level dialogue just like we're doing in this room. I think everybody in this room, you deserve a round of applause to be here at this time to discuss this. Please clap for yourselves, please. Thank you for being here. And I think AU6R, there needs to be an establishment of a reparation task force. Create a working group of diaspora and African leaders to push for reparations in global institutions, engage lawyers, academics, and historians to support legal claims for this. Number 2, economic and investment opportunities. I think it is important that we create diaspora reparation fund, strengthen inter-African trade and business relations, encourage corporate and institutional reparations. 3, cultural and educational exchange programs. I've mentioned the year of return. I think it's something that we should expand and discuss. Develop diaspora education and scholarship program for a lot of our people. Strengthening African history and reparation awareness is critical. I think someone also mentioned that. Number 4 that we're not really doing well is grassroots mobilization and community empowerment. We need to engage diaspora communities and leaders to really town hall meetings, webinars, and focus groups, within each country to be able to, again, strengthen this reparation discussion. We need to empower our youth and women in the reparation movement because women are very powerful. And you can see, I think we have how many percentage of this room? Women and youth, I think it's very critical that we really engage with the women because support women-led economic empowerment program focus on reparative justice. We need to use digital and social media for mass mobilization. I think this is very, very important. And I think the last point, I know you're looking at your time, I'm almost done, is how do we build and strengthen collaboration for the theme of the year? We need to establish coordinated leadership and governance framework. I think we need to have AU6R Reparation Steering Committee, a core group of African diaspora leaders and policy historians, legal experts that can work with us to ensure that this is enforced. And then also respond for policy coordination. We need to develop a strategic roadmap, engage African governments and AU institutions like ECOSOC, PAP, Pan-African Parliament, and so on. And number two, we need to strengthen institutional partnership, or collaborate with key stakeholders, all right, like CARICOM, AU, engage African financial and business institutions, mobilize religious, cultural, and social groups. I think this is also very important. Number three is to implement joint programs and projects specifically for this. Because of my time, we also need to create sustainable engagement platforms, like host annual Diaspora and Reparation Summit. It shouldn't end this year. It should be something that should be continuous. We need to create digital collaboration hub where this can consistently be mentioned, and mentorship and leadership program is something that is very critical. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, with these few points of ours, we believe that we have been able to expatiate on all our points. But to summarize, I think for us, what is most critical is together we stand, divided we fall. It is high time that we have one voice. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that very detailed and well articulated summary. Just to highlight, I think this is something that doesn't necessarily, a little bit, but the sixth region and the importance of collaboration with diaspora and Africans. We talk a lot here on the continental Africans, but I think it's also really important to bring them on. And I'm happy to note that we have a number of representatives from the diaspora in the room, and hopefully this, would lead to very many more developments and in collaboration opportunities in the future. Moving on to Deborah, last but not the least table, if you want to come up.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I believe every group presented very well, and I'll be presenting or summarizing a few points we have discussed. We've been circling around more questions rather than answers, so I'll be asking those questions and summarizing a few points, and I'll try to use my time precisely. So we started from the theme of the year. So the theme of the year is Justice for Africans and People of African Descendants through Reparation. So we tried to dissect or unpack the theme of the year. So we talked about reparation in terms of external and internal. So when we talk about external, we can discuss about the global financial system, the World Bank, IMF, the exploitation of Africa, lacking of representation in the UN. Africa have the more than 18% of the population, but lacks representing in the veto power in the UN. So we've discussed a few points about that. And in terms of internal, there are internal issues at national level that aren't addressed, such as race, ethnicity, inequality, injustice, discrimination. So this internal issues still hold and hamper us from building some movements. So this theme also talks about the descendants of Africans. So this theme also includes them as well. So we try to discuss some forms of reparation. So we started with global gatherings. Next, we talked about compensations. Most of the groups here discussed about compensations in terms of climate, colonization, slavery, economic disparity, poverty, resource exploitation. So we have seen some promises from the West trying to compensate Africans, but we haven't seen it in action. So this compensation is needed for the reparation of Africa. We also discussed about what if we're given compensation, and how are we going to fairly distribute this compensation, and how do we build a system that how we are going to spend the compensation. We also talked about another form of reparation, which is unofficial apology from the Westerns. Now, currently, we can talk about still Africa is still colonized, like colonizations, proxy wars from the West, such influences. So we want the Westerns to officially apologize and acknowledge the difficulties that Africans are having, and we can some in our teams. One of our members mentioned an example from Australia. So Australia almost wiped out the indigenous people of the land, and now they have officially apologized, and they have a day just for they have a national apology day. So this is an inspiration we can take from Australia. So next we talked about the invading countries should support the returning of the descendants or the diaspora. So this Westerns should support the descendants to return back to Africa and build Africa together. Next, we discussed about how do we demand such huge compensations, and we've talked about collective demand or continental demand. So each and every country of Africa have lost some things, artifacts, cultures, languages, people. So these African countries should come together and demand this reparation. Also, we can demand through historical records. So we can use our histories, go back to our history, and bring it back here so that we can ask for equal compensation and move forward. The next question, we talked about how can we work together in practical terms. So working with diaspora networks, collaborating with CSO, young CSOs and community associations, acknowledging the networks we have. Most of the time we think about building new networks, building new CSOs, but we have different networks that are already existing and trying to mapping them all so we can work on them. Building strategies, creating pool of funds, capacity buildings in terms of leadership, in terms of digital literacies and other expertise. Yeah, so I have a few provocative questions we discussed. So one of the question is, when does history begin for compensation, for justice and reparation for Africa? And the next question is, how do we address race, ethnicity, and discrimination within ourselves in Africa? So these are a few questions we discussed about, and this is the summary I have for now. And if my teammates want to add anything, I would like to give the floor.
Thank you, Deborah, for highlighting your team's discussion, particularly on a very important part of the reconciliation process, which is truth-telling, acceptance, and apology. And I think that's very important, to start with as a starting point for all of us, and even in our advocacy activities as we would be discussing. We've heard from all the tables, but I think since I have absolute power and discretion at this point in time, I may open it up, for the next 5 minutes, because I know there's some people who are stateless or tableless, in case they might want to share their thoughts or their reflections and insights, or just anyone who, might have something to say. I could allocate 1 minute to them if this is something that we're interested in. Okay. I see Joyce, there's one hand and there's another hand here. Okay, so we'll take Joyce and Rocio. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Your dictatorship is advantageous to some of us. So thanks. Well, I just wanted to highlight something, and that is colonialism had other consequences. And part of those consequences is genocide, different forms of genocide. You have, amongst other, sexual genocide of women, you have cultural genocide, and the actual genocide of annihilation of people, extermination of groups of people. Now, most, if not all African states, we know that were colonized, but then you have direct victims of genocide. And so when we are talking about colonialism as a whole, just so that we can also find a way within whatever strategies that we are developing to also directly look at those victims. When dealing with colonialism, you will be dealing with the state. But at the time of the genocides during the colonial period, for some of the communities, like where I come from, there was no state. The states there, you had Namaqualand, which was a state on its own because those traditional leaders signed treaties, international treaties, peace treaties with the state of Germany. And then you have the Herer that did that too. And so you had those states that existed then, and then now you have the states within the borders of the 1884, 1885 Berlin Conference. And so just that balance to also not to look at colonialism as a whole, but to also in the meantime amplifying the voices of those minorities there. And I think a strategic document in that regard, you have the Ogoja from Kenya, amongst others, those communities' voices needs to also be amplified amongst the colonial project that we are dealing with. Thank you.
Apologies because I don't speak that loud, so I need the microphone. I just wanted to maybe acknowledge the idea, and we discussed this also, the diversity of diaspora and how the diaspora in itself, I mean, has to bring a dialogue of inclusiveness and also of acknowledging the beauty and the diversity that also they provide to the communities where they came to. So in the case of Mexico, of course, we have Afro-native diaspora that speaks very differently culturally, talking about the people from the Caribbean and of course of the West Coast of the US or the East Coast of the US. So that's also very important to acknowledge, and how this culturally brought us also diversity, and how we are going to place that situation in the discourse of the dialogue of reparations as well.
I just wanted to add, coming from the United States and coming from the Caribbean, but representing the United States, that we have an issue of self-determination that many of you don't realize. The Decolonization Act of 1960 did not impact us, right? Or kept us locked away. And so the issue of self-determination, where we want to be able to rule ourselves and to be able to thrive, is important to us. And many of you who come to the US, you're not really encouraged to mix with African Americans. And so therefore that divide has continued. And so I just want you to think, when you think self-determination, please don't think it's just other people. It's we the Black people in the United States want to be self-determined. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
I would like to add something, maybe because I think this process is going to be huge, and I think a lot of people comes with different traumas from different perspectives, and I think it's also the first time, whether it's in the diaspora or also on the continent, that we people have the possibility to address these injustices and to look for answers for them. So how do we make sure that in this process we can take care of each other, and we don't reproduce the power dynamics that we have inherited and who keep us divided? So I don't know. Maybe it's a bit a topic, but I think it's necessary to make sure that in this process of looking for justice, we don't reproduce some form of violence in that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our colleague has mentioned a lot of points that we raise. But just to add some, I think this process has to be a means to achieve something rather than to hide our mistakes or backwardness. Because most of time, as an African, I think that we are very expert on mentioning reasons and overlying on our backwardness regards on history and different lack of development. But this reparation process has to be a means to achieve a development, and we must believe on ourselves to do that. If we don't believe that we can prosper, we can make an impact, we can make a development, it goes like a routine. So earlier, my sister from the Caribbean also mentioning, the problem is from us. It's not just to figure out and to mention what the others are doing, but we have to come back to the point that we must believe on ourselves to be united, to be integrated, and to use this reparation process as a means for development. My group mates and I was discussing on the point reparation as a means of development. So if we can use regarding on this matter, it's not the usage, but how we use the method that we're going to implement. I think it's going to be a way for great milestone achievement. Thank you.
So I think this is a topic that can, well, firstly is obviously very sensitive, and one can quickly go down a rabbit hole. And we can, look at our fellow countries like South Africa that has taken it in one direction, and other countries that have taken it in another in terms of interpretation of what justice and, the theme of the year kind of really means. And I think for us, as part of the African Union 6 region, it's all about taking an honest reflection in terms of what does it mean, what do we want to achieve, and what is that timeline. As much as, the chair initially mentioned that it's a year and it's not enough, one just has to look at what has happened in the US in the last, 15 days. It's a lot, right? So I think we also have an opportunity to be very aggressive and very intentional about what we want and how we want that. And I would urge us to look at technology as a means to deliver and rewrite the economic injustice or the economic impacts or social impacts, as well as, political impacts that have come through as a means of that. So, to the point, it's all about, getting Africa to return.
Very quickly, just to say that there, I think, about 1, 2, 3 hands, in the room, and we do have one online. So those are four incoming comments, and to which I would allocate exactly 4 minutes. And just to say that, please keep it under 1 minute, because you are the ones standing between these people and lunch. That's not a good place to be.
Okay, when I was presenting, I was very in a hurry to use my time, so I forgot some points. So I just want to mention some of them. So we were discussing about how we view our timeline. So in terms of theme for this year, it is about reparation and injustice. So how long are we going to take to really practice our strategy? So we were talking about how we should make the themes a movement, not just a year theme. For example, last year it was a year of education. Now it is about reparation. So we have to stick on that point and make it a movement so it can really have an impact on Africa. So it's not a yearly thing or action to one activity to another activity, but a movement that stays long and we can see it happening. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. As the mic travels further down, can we have the online comment? The comment?
you very much. My name is Janet Joe. I'm with the Southern Africa Trust. It has been good to follow the conversations. So for me, as I reflected during the group work, sitting and thinking, especially around this theme and also the entry points, and I have heard it as well from the report backs from the group, some of it. One is really an entry point around the debt justice component, looking at the global financial system and architecture and how it lacks representation, but also how it has perpetuated the debt trap. So looking at the financial debt in terms of colonial debt legacies, issues around structural adjustment impacts, the debt trap, and also the resource-backed loans that we're now currently seeing. The second component is really around the ecological debt, which also we have been pushing for in terms of environmental degradation as Africa was and continues to be exploited, and really framing the odious debt question, the core issues being the dictatorial regime debts, but also the colonial debts, and how we can look at it both externally and internally. I also concur, of course, with issues around the climate justice and changing the narrative to climate reparations, looking at loss and damage compensation, adaptation financing, technology access, amongst others, but building more so the community resilience and our resilience and our resistance as well to the injustices that we currently are experiencing. Then, of course, the natural resource governance being my third component in terms of engagement and entry point when it comes to engaging with this, with the theme of the year of the AU, the natural resource governance, once again, looking at the historical injustices, what is currently obtaining, and then looking at the transformative areas we can focus on, especially priming the issue of resource rights for communities, benefit sharing, traditional rights and environmental protection, and also participation of our communities and locals in the natural resource governance sector. More so when we now look at the current plunge that's going to happen or recur when it comes to the quest for critical minerals, which are a lot, and domicile and sitting here on our continent, and how we're going to see the same reproduction that we're talking about of the plunder of our African resources. So really priming as well the natural resource governance. And I totally agree with documenting the historical journey so that it gives us the roadmap. It could be a river with the many things therein that we can walk together, or a path that we can walk together and say, this is where we are and these are the issues that we're going to take forward. I also want to agree with one, as I conclude with my minute, is around the aid dependency in terms of how are we going to reclaim all this that we are talking about: space, representation, our resources, our financial resources, natural resources, our people's efforts, sweat and blood that the West benefited from in the current aid dependency that we are in. I want to believe we, including the AU, our regional economic blocs, they still depend a lot on aid. How are we going to situate and frame ourselves, including ourselves as civil society organizations? And we saw what has happened, as has been said, the US, the stop work that came through the executive order from President Trump, and how that has shaken all the efforts that we were doing. So for me, it's also to bring in that component and how we begin once again to have conversations around the aid dependency by our governments, by our institutions.
Thank you, Janet. I will have to stop you exercising my dictatorship powers because we do still have two more people in the rooms. I am so sorry, but I'm going to have to limit you, gents, to 30 seconds each. So few sentences. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the major concept or comment that I have in regards to the theme of the year, as well as the major concerns I have with that regard, is that is the African Union really prepared to effectively address this African challenge? Because the African Union, as it has lots of questions in regards to financing, in regards to even having legitimacy among the member states, is really the African Union the institution to answer this question? Because I believe as an African, we shouldn't be delusional in terms of setting our own agendas, because there is a saying that is there is no free lunch. So are we really, can we really set our own agendas? Because all the questions or the thematic area needs financing. Who's going to finance it? So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For me, the 30 seconds comment I would have is that I think listening in the last 2 days at these discussions on reparations clearly points to the fact that we need to sort of build some simplified knowledge so that all of us understand what we are dealing with. It's very easy for those who have been part of the discussions on reparations to sort of think that this is an everyday discourse. It's not. And I think that's something that we must do, to just level the ground to help those who are, coming in to find it easier. The other thing is, of course, this need to reconcile the roots of this whole question with the current realities that the continent and the world is faced with, because there will be a lot of intervening variables there that may quickly derail us as a continent. And we know that derailing us is very easy. Already USAID has derailed us in many ways, and many other things will do that. And lastly, the other thing is this politics of geography. Geography meaning that, people located here, located there, there is a value in doing that, but also there is a value for us imagining a boundless Africa. Because indeed, the Africa that we are in is very much a product and experience that came from colonialism. So in a sense, unless you remove yourself from those boundaries and start imagining something bigger, it becomes very hard to engage in an empowering discourse. So I guess that for me, that would be the end. And for my brother, the comfort is the African Union should never become the building here. You should not think about it that way. This is supposed to be actually a citizen-led organ. It's only that us citizens have been sort of made to think that the African Union building is the one to define this narrative. This is our narrative. And since they gave us an advisory organ, let's use that space that we have as a starting point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think a round of applause, really, for yourselves. We are only 2 minutes behind schedule. But just to say, and to just kind of like tie this off, is that it seems to me that there are a lot of moving parts to this conversation. We've had economics, we've had education, we've had narrative building, apologies, continental Africans and diaspora Africans. And so with a lot of moving parts would come engineering. And I think this is an important a good point to stop, because it is a segue to the conversation that will come after lunch, which would be road mapping and engineering what the strategy for the year would be. So I am able to move a little bit of a housekeeping. So lunch, I am told, will be served right outside. We should aim to be back at exactly 2 p.m. So we've got 57 minutes. All right.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much. Great to see such animated spirit in the room. So it sounds like and looks like this is a spiritual journey. But I think we had a really wonderful morning. Remarkable insights from all of you. And very inspiring, very uplifting. If you did not know about reparations, and if you do not know why we are advocating for reparations, I hope you do now. And we heard one or two young colleagues did not know what reparations was all about. So this is a very positive thing. We are moving forward now. And I think we should also thank Ruth for her excellent facilitation. Round of applause, please. She's not going anywhere. I'm just introducing this session and then she'll take over again. Because I said to Ruth, you know, now is the time for Africa's young people to take the lead. All these gray hairs must now step aside. Let the young people take over. You have some gray hair, Cecilia, and you're actually agreeing. This is wonderful. So we're on the same page, you know? And so Ruth just took over and she ran with it and she organized. And we hadn't actually met before. So the first time we've met. So we had to do a lot of planning as we sat there brainstorming, planning how we're going to do the facilitation for the session. And we were literally building the plane as we were flying. There's another saying of writing the book as you're reading it. That's pretty much what we're doing. So we will get there in the end, and this will be a very productive outcome. So moving into the next session, which is also quite interactive, and you'll be working in 4 thematic groups. And because now we are fewer, we can actually use the tables here to do the work. And you are going to self-identify yourself in one of these 4 groups. And the idea is now moving forward with everything that we've discussed. We've got some of the content, we know some of the policy. We talked about ways we could work together. One of the ideas emerged was about clustering or having thematic groups or just having some smaller, more focused working groups on a range of, very broad range of topics. So the idea is we're going to have 4 groups, Group A, Group B, Group C, Group D, and as thematic working groups, essentially working groups, okay? And you will self-identify which of these groups you would like to be in. We say we might put the research and policy here, legal and political, where are all the lawyers? No, around here. Education, capacity building, decolonial studies, maybe at the back there. And international partnerships and allyships, because we know we have some philanthropic organizations in the room, can then cluster maybe in that corner of the room there. So the idea is that this is not your definitive identity. Some of you are working across, maybe are working on all 4 groups. So don't feel under pressure to clone yourself or use AI representations of yourself to be in all 4 groups. That's a joke. But the idea is we're going to develop a matrix, a table of the organization, the thematic focus group, and the activities. And we're thinking now, at least in the initial phase of this group, this consortium, which we're just for the time being labeling the Pan-African Reparations Consortium, is a 5-year period of work where we will find ways to work together and support each other and engage continentally, regionally, 6th region, internationally, globally, because we've been saying that we need to push this agenda forward. And for the purpose, for our purpose, for everybody that came here today, we need some type of an identifier, just an identity. So we're not creating a structure. This will be a very loose affiliation. It will literally, for the time being, exist as an Excel spreadsheet. That will be the full extent of its existence for the time being. It could morph into the future. As you know, we have partners in the room who have other partners, and so on and so forth. And that resource mobilization strategy will come up later on. For the time being, we just need to get a sense of who's doing what, how you're doing it, potentially how we could collaborate with each other and where we can work together. And so also, if you feel the need to make sure that your organization's name is included in a particular thematic focus group, so feel free to do so. And that can be listed. That's not a problem. So nobody's being constrained. Nobody's being shackled. If I can draw from that theme of, you see what I did there? Thank you. So feel free to self-identify. Obviously, if some groups are, shall we say, less populated, anemic, we might ask colleagues to to just kind of spread themselves around. So we don't have like I'm sure all the lawyers might want to just come and do their lawyering here, and then we'll have to do billable hours, and it's going to be complicated. Okay, that's another joke. Okay, I keep saying these jokes. I think it's just to, our sister here said we must do self-care, we must look after each other. A little bit of levity, I think, helps to lighten the load of the really heavy work we have to do. So, by the end of the day, we'll have the names of the organization, thematic focus activities. That will be put on a Excel spreadsheet, which Ruth and Don Dare, who's at the back, he didn't introduce himself, he's the CEO of the Pan-African Lawyers Association, have already began to work on. So there's already a process underway to try to help to figure out who's doing what and how we can all coordinate ourselves, okay? Well, that's just for the purposes of coordination, organization. Famous quote from Kwame Nkrumah, don't agonize, organize. Yes. My sister from the diaspora. Turn on the mic.
I want to organize.
100%. That's the spirit.
But in the spirit of disrupting conventional thinking.
Yes.
If we have thematic work groups, that's one thing, and it's good for the spreadsheet. But if these same work groups are going to then now ideate around activities, I think that's where I want to disrupt in positive ways. Because the cross-pollination of our sectors is essential for each sector. So you need the artists in research and policy, and you need the attorneys in education and capacity building so that we balance each other around what's feasible.
Absolutely.
And sometimes us artists, I mean, we're going to the moon, we're doing it this year, but the attorneys kind of ground us about what's possible on the timeline. And then sometimes they, as researchers, are afraid to ask questions that we don't mind. And so I just think for the spreadsheet, thematic work groups is good, but for the activities and what they look like, I don't know. Is there a way we can rethink that?
Yeah, Ruth has a suggestion, but also we will have a feedback session, and we will be requesting the rapporteurs who did a great job to continue rapporteuring. That plenary session is precisely the opportunity for that cross-ideation that you've described, because this is just the beginning. This is a long, long journey. Ruth, you wanted to add? I seem to have read the mind of the young people, despite my gray hairs. Okay. So I hope that answers. And yeah, it literally is to help us to start to get a sense of how we can move forward together. And as I said, nobody is locked into any space. Completely feel free to move around, even during the session. I don't want to cause chaos and see a lot of people moving in different directions at the same time. At least start with your group. And if you feel a very strong calling to defect, please do so. We're not going to hold you back. That's the nature of this space, okay? Is that clear? So the questions are, what is your organization doing to contribute to the reparation agenda? I think perhaps as you describe that, also put your activities on the table so that we don't spend too much time going around in a circle. And then I think we discussed the whole issue of collaboration in the morning session. So we have a lot of that already. And then just try to concretize a little bit. And we see where there are overlaps, complementarity between organizations, potentials for collaboration. Even right now, some of the things you're doing, you might be able to say, oh, you can help us with ABC. and XYZ can come and support us to do, you know? So that's the kind of thinking we want to generate, at least before we leave this room. So we have something to work for. And I think Ruth will put it up as a Google Docs, big tech and all that. Yes, we're fighting back, so on and so forth. But it will just help us to communicate, even when we leave this room, so we have a sense of how we can work together going forward. Is that clear for everybody? So research and policy analysis, legal and political, advisory, education capacity building, decolonial studies in the disruptive section at the back there, and international partnerships and allyships in this side here. Clear? So you can now move around and join your group that you would like to be in. Thank you. And then we have, how much? We have an hour? We have 45 minutes again, but this is a loose interpretation of 45 minutes. So according to Ruth, it's basically just say an hour. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Group A, research and policy analysis. I believe that is Genevieve. I did forget. I think I will, because this was a much longer conversation, and I think we will aim for 10 minutes. Oh, no, yeah, it's fine. I've been Is it possible to have the questions back, just to be, please? Thank you. Can we have one house, please? Yeah, thank you. So we were the research and policy analysis group that was very diverse, because we had media, funds, research, arts, law around the table. So that was very interesting to discuss around research and policy. So each of our organization talked about what was the plan to contribute to implementing to the Continental Reparation agenda. Some of us are already doing the work on reparations. Others are planning and thinking about how should we frame the reparations discussions inside our organizations. For questions 2, what are the best avenues for collaboration to ensure synergy? That will be linked to the question 3, but we arrived to the solution of creating a community of practice, because we had such diverse profile around the table, and we're like, okay, I think that every profile could contribute to what everyone is doing on reparations, and the best way to go forward on that subject would be to create a community of practice. And for the realistic action plan, first we talked about, okay, the organization that are already doing work on reparation should be joined by the organization that are programming, framing, thinking about, because I think it's more practical and easier and faster also, and it's also always in the spirit of community of practices. We also talked about creating a database that will be based on multidisciplinary work and transcontinental work research with the diaspora, all the diasporas, the continent, and to connect with the relevant institutions, and dividing that community of practice into thematic groups. We also talked about the next step of repository of current, of existing research and policy around reparations. After we did that, we talked about we should find gaps into that subject that need to be filled, and see how we can work to fill those gaps. And then for reparation, looking at the models of reparations that are based into indigenous practices, I think it's correct. And last but not least, the financial part mapping, because if we want to be very concrete about the action plan and to be very realistic, we have to have into that community of practice, if you have like fund profiles to say, okay, I am the financial part and we can like have budget for that kind of project on reparations, even though we can have like maybe some second guess about some fundings because we are not politically aligned or things like that, we can still find ways to integrate reparations in those budgets, even though we are not like very aligned with the foundation project. But yeah, I don't know if it was complete, but please complete me if I forgot something. I know I'm the facilitator, but I have a question. Were you able to concretize or kind of put down, you know, in terms of a timeline of potentially what would be happening this year? I know we did say initially that it was going to be a 5-year roadmap, but maybe for this year, if there was a way or if it was possible that you were able to articulate that, and if you're able to share this.
So one of the members of our community is an attorney based in Kenya, and he's a part of the 15-member team. They're a part of the political affairs section of the African Union focused on peace and security. They're an advisory organ, and each year they participate in the transnational transitional justice forum. And so that happens in the third quarter of the year. And we kind of use that as a benchmark for this year to make sure that we have a basic community of practice and some message to deliver at that forum. So fluid and organic, but we know the third quarter will be ready.
Thank you.
Just to add from what you said, that when we talked about what is the best avenue for collaboration, we thought that the best avenue for now is to build a community of practice. A community of practice, not a physical one, but something that is virtual, where it will be at a very small cost for us to do it. And all you need is a couple of champions who can then help to host it. So we think that that would be a good avenue to start the collaboration and the synergy. And in that, you have a database of all of us and the different kinds of things they are working on, which you can then bring together and see how then to build that what we call synergy and complementarity around this area. Because what we found out just by going around is that there are organizations that are already doing something on reparations today, which we can build on, so that those who are coming in as new players have got something that they can latch on without having to restart everything. Yeah.
Yes, just a quick question, because I think we all want this database. Have we identified who is going to be responsible for building it?
Can answer that. So, I mean, a database process, depending on how sophisticated we want to be, can take a while to build. But I will say that at the end of this session, we'll be able to share a Google Sheet that kind of has, based on the thematic area, you know, a place that you guys can help populate. We can help populate. So we've started this document. It's in its very, very early stages, but we just thought at Paolo that we should start. And then, so the QR code will go up probably at the end. But so yeah, there is something skeletal that exists that we can start working with that we can also improve on as we go. Yeah. I think the only thing, and I'm taking the opportunity as facilitator, but also from Palu, contribution to this thematic area that I would say that we intend to do would be research and analysis, and particularly, and this came out a little bit yesterday during the session that we had, that we co-convened at Best Western, and it will be research and analysis of the current legal framework. So say we were to pursue a legal avenue and litigating. So that kind of analysis is something that we have to do. So Palu has done this and just concluded this, but simply for restitution and not for reparations. So we have a similar document that exists that is research on legal framework in Africa, Europe, and North America that is yet to be published, but will be published sometime this year, but that's specific to restitution. So we intend to replicate the same, and it's also an activity potentially that we hope to at least begin this year. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other responses for the research and policy analysis thematic area? Okay.
I think the other thing we can add is we talked, when we talked about research, we recognize the fact that there are partners here who have competences of doing participatory research that can help us. Others are doing foundational research, which is looking at specific historical things that are connected to the current times. Others are doing research that is, looking at various geographical regions. So really why we went for the community of practice is because in order for us not to burden ourselves with huge infrastructure around how to do these things, we want to use these simple but effective ways. And as you've said, if you have a Google group, then in a week, everybody can know what everybody else works on, and people who have already work that they have done can even post it there for others to take advantage of.
Thank you. If there are no other responses, I think I'm happy to move to Group B, legal and political advocacy. Lillian.
Thank you. I'm going to try to summarize what we have shared, and we didn't respect your categories. So we have work on the A, B, and C, not D, I don't think, but please jump in, colleagues, if it's necessary. And also our approach was much more like to present like our thematic, strategic activities over the next year and also over the next 5 years. So, well, in terms of research, so we have, of course, like partners who share that they would, like Palu, that would work on strengthening the human rights arguments in regard to reparations. Some others on, I think, ICTJ producing policy papers or increasing the understanding of the reparations issue inside the organization, because they still need to see how they fit and into this landscape. I don't know if it's respectful of what you say, Sarah. But I think we have also from our end on African Futures Lab, gender and climate, that were strategic themes for this year. In terms of capacity building, we have also a lot of webinars with judges and lawyers, webinars with political actors that can be also organized, the youth, collaboration. In terms of collaboration, I think different members of our group mentioned the collaboration with local entities, whether it's in regard of gender issues, or whether it is in regard collaborating with local entities in the US who have worked on reparations, and that can maybe strengthen or where lessons can be exchanged. Also, in terms of what I designated as institutional advocacy, we have many initiatives planned this year. First of all, there is perspective to work on an opinion at the African Court, propose an opinion at African Court of Human Rights. also from AGF advocacy, an advocacy plan to work with different AU organs. I'm not sure that the AU organs are still need to be identified clearly. Have been identified, sorry. I think I have so many things. Yeah, ECOSOC, the white paper, and CEDAW. Sorry. Also, there was a proposition from our brother from the New Republic of the New Africa, sorry, to have a support, a collaborative support for the resolution of the Banjul Commission. We could go more into detail on that. And then from GMAC, I think bring a gender perspective in their advocacy at the AU level, but also member states. I think we also mentioned potentially an opinion to the an opinion at the International Court of Justice. But I think there are different initiatives in terms of institutional advocacy. And then what was very much maybe interesting in terms of how we can collaborate is that we have identified like different events that are happening this year. I give examples, but it doesn't mean that we are mentioning only that we stop on this. The spring meetings of the IMF and the World Bank, the AU and the EU Human Rights Dialogue, the mid-year summit of the African Union, the COP30, the UN General Assembly, etc. But I think the idea would be to have a calendar with strategic meetings where we can meet and then maybe organize events together. And also, yeah, in terms of campaigns, I think you mentioned the idea of this plebiscite that will be initiated by Republic of the New Africa. In regard to our work at African Futures Lab, also we plan campaigns on regard gender and climate. I think that's the main themes, but I'm happy if there's one colleague who wants to compliment me.
You did a great job and you were so busy. We want to thank you for that. One other thing that we had great discussion on is that the AU has already proclaimed the establishment of a legal reference group. Although we don't know if that's been constituted yet. It's a year and a half since they've proclaimed it. So we discussed establishing a complementary civil society legal reference group so that we do our work in tandem and complementary to whoever gets appointed to that legal reference group.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lillian. Just 2 points to add and perhaps clarify. When I said ICTJ needs to understand, we meant understand the legal and political hurdles. We have to agree that there are legal and political hurdles and how those can be navigated and how, as the Initiative for Transitional Justice in Africa, can contribute and support using the different platforms we have and opportunities to engage with the Department of Political Affairs to advance that agenda. And I appreciate this research group that highlighted the community of practice, but also the annual Transitional Justice Forum, which reflects on the state of transitional justice on the continent, bringing both state representatives and non-state representatives. That's also another avenue to take that process forward. So perhaps in the build up to that, there could be engagements to define how to shape the conversations that come up with concrete outcomes that shape, at least at the political level, I'll take this process forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian and colleagues, for highlighting everything you have. Just to say, we spoke about the events in May, the one for the Commission, the roundtable, which goes with Resolution 616.
from the African Commission that calls on academia and diaspora to engage. And apparently there's going to be a roundtable in partnership with ECOSOC sometime in May. So that's something we should rally around. And then we spoke about rallying the African Commission to adopt resolutions on specific cases, for instance, Namibia, or having this kind of session at the African Commission's session as a side event later in the year as well. And then having ECOSOC anchor the documents and links to the different organizations, what we're doing, and the different plans for the year, that it could be that central coordinating body. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to our rapporteur. Well done for 2 times today. Just to say also that one of the key role of GMAC for this year is to ensure that we adopt the Convention on Eliminating Violence Against Women and Girls. So this has been a key point in our declaration, which we'll be continuing to advocate for the summit. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I've got one up here. Thank you very much. I was particularly interested in this group because many of the activities, in my Palu hat around, in addition to research, but legal and policy advocacy. And so it's important to have these conversations because, I'm able to hear back, and I really hope we're able to populate this document or this database with these activities so that, we are able to reach out and organize in a more cohesive manner, because now I'm hearing that there'll be a lot of activities, during the media summit, as well as during the Banjul commission session, if it's going to be in Banjul this time around, but they will be confirming that soon. So it's an ongoing conversation, and thank you so much for sharing. I will now move to Group C. Cecile.
We were talking about education, capacity building, and decolonial studies, and my goodness, did we have an exciting time. We had educators, we had students, we had people like myself who are into advocacy and human rights and calling for African-centered curriculum. And then we had people whose background doesn't necessarily include that, but they gave a lot of input. So I'm going to try to just go through this so you can understand. Okay. So we understand that part of the problem with Africa is the education system that we inherited. And when we spoke specifically about Ethiopia, we saw that I thought Haile Selassie had a lot of influence, but in reality, Canada and others. And so we finally figured out that sometimes the education systems that you have that are based on colonial languages, right? English being predominant here, I think they left out some of the things they were supposed to teach you, right? And so you don't get the full education, you don't get full critical thinking skills, and it doesn't prepare the people for the needs of the country. So what they learned a lot about world history, Europe, right? About a few intellectuals, and those intellectuals are never Black, right? Nobody had heard about the African World History Project, and so we talked about what was needed, and there are things that are already there. So when we come to solutions, we'll talk about that. The youth were being advised when they were finished to go to Europe to go to the next level of study. So in Ethiopia, they talked about maybe at the local level, in some places you learn in Amharic, right? But when you get to college, it's now English. So the poor student who did not learn English is learning in English, but doesn't know English. So therefore, there's a loss there. That's really crazy. They didn't learn anything about chiefdoms, kingdoms, how our ancestors had gender equality, right? And they learned nothing about reparations, right? Okay. So they wanted they were trained to be consumers, not producers of knowledge, right? And a university does not look at subjective knowledge. So you have a lot of people who are engineers who might be in theory, but no practicum. Same thing with the medicine, etc. So now I begin to understand why sometimes when you come with your degrees to the West, they say, we need you to learn more. So that means that they knew already that what they gave you as education was already substandard and left out critical things. Most people who are highly educated were reproduced colonial mentality. Hopefully we don't insult anybody with that statement. And when we looked at our pre-colonial past, we didn't want to romanticize it. We wanted to be real. So people were about truth, right? There's a language issue. People want to be taught in their mother tongue. When you go to university, you should be taught in your mother tongue still, Amharic, right? Not just English or the colonial languages. So one of our people was a 17-year-old teacher in the university, and he talked about understanding multiple perspectives. We're not taught to do that. Global system is unfair, the education and foreign policy. And he talked about a diplomatic academy, how in some places children were learning how to win the heart and mind of Africa and the strategies to use, right? And so he called for an African diplomatic academy, right, where you learn extracontinental diplomacy and not reparations by begging, right? We should be taught the history of how we can benefit social and economically from, ourselves. Okay, one person talked about how science is misused. Many people don't know that there were Black women in the States that were used as gynecology, right? And then Sarah Bartman's story. And we know that a Black woman got us to space, but we only heard about John Glenn, right? We never heard about her. And we didn't hear a lot about a lot of things. So a lot of our our African knowledge has been misappropriated and then branded as someone else's. So how do we bring that back? When it comes to student movements, we want to see why are governments against their own students, right? So there needs to be something to address that. And usually the students are responding to what they're not getting. So therefore, that should be a voice that you should be listening to. So free thought is not really very free here in Africa. And our indigenous, indigenous traditional medicine, sciences, math, all of these things. One young lady pointed out that Gits is a language and that people in Germany and China are studying it, but nobody here. And that language is tied to science and math and medicine and math. But other people will soon know it and you won't, right? So we know that we have Code Orissa. There is a lack of distribution of African books. And then Africans don't hire Africans, maybe because they know that you're getting a substandard education, right? So therefore, when other people come, you're quick to pick them up. So you're in on it, but you're not telling us that that's what it is, right? So we need to catalog what's already there. And we talked about the brain drain of when Africans do their PhD and it's not published and their professors steal their work and then publish it as their own, right? So we're forever losing. So it's not just about formal education, but also informal. People learn in different ways. And so what African mindset, what are you consuming? So we talked about apartheid, acceptance of inferiority, xenophobia. That's why you see South Africans and others be saying, you're a foreigner, but when I come with my US visa, I don't even need a visa to come to your country, but your neighbor does, right? So, and whites are always seen as positive. So when it comes to foreign investment, it's always some white, some Chinese, some Arab, but it's never anything done to make sure that local Africans are able to perform in their own countries. So we thought that there would be, people don't think we deserve it, already defeated. So that's going to be our biggest challenge with this reparations issue, because some of them have been taught to be the self-defeatists, right? And so we need artists, filmmakers, and people to begin to make films. When I was a child in Jamaica, I am watching QB7. QB7 was the Nuremberg trials, for those who don't know. Only because I'm in human rights, I remember. I'm reading Anne Frank. Where's your African equivalent? Where's your African equivalent? So we need media, we need, in education, we need films, we need books, right? This mother tongue language was very, very important. We know the African Union has declared Swahili, right, as an intercontinental language. And we believe that just like how we're speaking English now, our children could have learned that language. So even though you learn your mother tongue, most Africans speak 3-4 languages anyway, right? But if you learn your mother tongue, but you should also have that one Africa language. So then curriculum needs to be focused on one Africa, Kwame Nkrumah's vision for us, right? So informal skills, soft skills, everything needs to be practical. And then in most of our education, you either go into technical and you go into other philosophical. And we say, why can't the carpenter also be a philosopher? So no, we don't want any more either or education, which tells you that if you have these skills, then you're not capable of high mind thinking, right? So we want it to be both and, not an either or. In some of our solutions, we talk about One Africa curriculum, strengthen and build the African Center of Excellence everywhere. And we say that we have one in Ethiopia and we have one in Senegal, right? access to education in schools. Every child doesn't have access to education. I see too many children in the streets of Africa when they should be in school. Technical training, only 2% of your population has vocational training in a country that's why the Chinese come in to build. You're not preparing your students to do the work of Africa, but you build pyramids that no one can understand, right? Can't figure out how to build a pyramid, but now we don't know how to build a road or a bridge. We need to be training our own teachers in African-centered. We need to do online courses so we can use technology, all right? So we need technological access and internet available in every rural area. And then the toys that the children play with, black dolls and books that have black figures that are positive, right? So that they reinforce self-esteem. African media, movies and books, increase in informal education, create higher education curriculum in the mother tongue, right? So you don't have that disconnect. And they want the ancient languages restored. We want a database of articles, of curriculums. These things, folks, have already been created. It's really just pulling them together. Vocational training and skills. We have engineers who have practical but no practicum, right? So we want that. Many of you don't know that in the 1800s when they went to Burundi, they were already doing C-sections. Your people were already doing C-sections. Huh? I captured that in one of my articles. So you are being taught that things are coming to you. The vaccines really came out of Africa, right? When the Africans came to the West, they taught them how to grow rice and all those things. So we only frame ourselves in one way, when in reality, it is our African people's minds that have created all this for the world. Critical thinking skills need to be part of education, problem solving. And then all the young people said that they didn't get any career assessment and guidance, right? So they're going to school and they don't know what they're going to come out and do, right? So that needs to be addressed. Another one was a well-articulated reparation document should include all education. So everything that, if we want people to understand and have empathy for our own reparations, they need to learn it from their very little, just like the Jews do. We don't want to radicalize them as crazy as the Zionists have done, but we want to do it in a way that that child understands that something happened and that repair needs. And reparations is not just other people doing something for us, but self-repair. So what is the self-repair that we have? So we empower our young people. So that Swahili is needed, right? That's that one Africa. The history of pre-colonial Africa is not known. Though I know that the UN has 8 volumes of African history written by Africans years ago, folks. And in Chicago, there was an African World History Project, which I have on a PDF I can give to people too. So it's not that the work is not there, it's just that we don't know, right? They said they learned about Axum and the Zulu, but nobody else, right? And they know the horror stories of colonization, but how do we really heal from our history? And of course, we see all the ethnicity wars and civil wars, right? And so they want real history so that they can come up with real solutions. The time frames, okay. So you said 1 to 5 years. So we need a needs assessment of education, all right, across the continent, and do some research and analysis, identify the resources that are available for curriculum, because it's already there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? And funding is needed, right? Database of experts and the curriculum, and then with the funding is the grant writing, et cetera. Definitely curriculum in technical education, because only 2% of your students are that. And then this one language, Swahili, right? So that means that Swahili needs to be translated into every mother tongue that's out there. If you want Swahili to be the one language of Africa, then that means that every dialect, the children need to be learning those 2 languages from their mother tongue, right? So in the first 5 years, there could be localized projects that do that, right? So I think that's what I have. Ladies, do you have anything in the back you want to add? Thank you.
I believe I just want to add one thing, because in our group, like she said, we had lecturers, but we had also people who had various platforms, including the GIMA. So they said, okay, what activities are lined up? I know that you have already mentioned some, but I just want to add the online platform usage. So they've said that we are willing to come to the platform and share our skills, maybe to decolonize the minds of those young people who are coming to do this advocacy. So they've already shared all their names and said, can we arrange maybe an online capacity training for everyone who wants to learn about how to decolonize their mind, and then create a movement to go back in their communities now. So some were even pledging some few dollars to say, we just want to go, especially in the universities, in the communities, like rural communities or marketplaces, to just try to amplify the voices, or to just try to harvest what a good reparations agenda looks like for African women and youth. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I think that was a very well articulated response to the 3 questions. Does anyone have any if anyone has any reaction, we'll be happy to take them. Okay, if no one is reacting, I will react. Just to say that I know you will forgive me, Lisa, if you were not broadcasting this yet, but I know that GMAC is planning an event for young lawyers or young legal minds, particularly a mock court or moot court trial. Yeah, sometime in the middle of the year. Yeah, and I'm sure when the document goes up and the database is updated, this is something that would go in. But yeah, because I think it's a very, very important activity to get the young lawyers or the young policymakers involved as early as possible, as early as law school or as early as university. Okay, did we lose? No, we still have Brenda. So we will move to Group D on international partnerships and allyship by Brenda.
Good afternoon. We would have appreciated and loved to see more people in the room when discussing this, because as our group title entails, it's about allyship and it's about partnership. So when we talk about partnership, we really have to believe in certain principles, the principles of solidarity especially. So in our group, we again did not have too many participants. We had 3 youth organizations, all local and based in Ethiopia. Ethiopia Youth Council. We also had Youth Awareness and Mindset Growth, and we also had Enderese. And then in addition, we had Oxfam International, we had the AU ECOSOC, and we also had Trust Africa and African Union 60th Region. So in terms of the first question, what can your organization do? We went organization by organization. So starting from the youth organizations that we had, they offered and they said they would contribute awareness raising, as they were part of several networks of youth. So they're able, for example, to not only create some awareness in Ethiopia, but take it to IGAD and the AU and beyond that to global spaces. They also said they can contribute capacity building and policy advocacy and linking of youth at country level and other global platforms. So basically providing the experience that the young people have and making sure that there's representation at all levels and they're bringing it to that level. The youth also committed to organizing cultural and information exchanges. And again, we were emphasizing on partnership. So for them, they were very clear that this was not just cultural exchanges that happened here, but that brings the diplomats, that also brings in a lot of solidarity and takes it to the global levels. So it's basically a commitment from their end in terms of active participation in justice and reparation conversations throughout the year. They also said there would be the conduit or the vehicle for connecting international players to local citizens and communities, and also to policy players. So that was what we received from the youth. So in terms of the other organizations, I'll try to run this fast, but Trust Africa, Our Money People, they committed to engaging philanthropists or philanthropic institutions and facilitating access to resources. They also reminded us of the fact that they've been the vehicle for linking, and they will continue doing that. So providing this necessary linkage between the work that's happening on the continent and the work that's happening and the actors the work that's happening and conversations that are happening elsewhere, and also the actors, ensuring that, like they've done here, bringing the diaspora into this meeting, bringing some of us, including myself, facilitating me to be here, and making sure that there's meaningful solidarity and partnership being created, both in terms of the conversations that are happening here and the initiatives, both locally and also in the diaspora. They also committed to developing a detailed database that identifies actors, but which can be used as for advocacy purposes. A database that identifies actors, as well as they also talked about identifying actors, but also a country-based database where they identify what issues each country has in terms of reparation. You know, if it's each country, what are the issues in each country, that database, and making sure that that helps us in terms of for advocacy, the advocacy that we're doing. And then Oxfam International, our contribution was the ability of connecting to various platforms, especially at multilateral levels, facilitating the voice, making sure that we identify the advocacy spaces on reparation, and not being the ones to speak on behalf of Africa or Africans, but rather facilitating that to happen. For example, we already committed, and I mentioned this, that we've been working a lot on the UN Security Council reform, and we invite you to a conversation that we're having on Friday, this Friday. But mainly we're looking at that as a question of reparation and injustice to Africa. So making sure that such platforms have the experience and the voices, and not just the UN Security Council. I remember somebody earlier on said that Trump is withdrawing from the UN. No, Trump is not withdrawing from the UN. Trump is doing two things. Trump is weakening the UN, and Trump is also ensuring that where he can abuse the UN, he continues abusing. So if Trump wanted to withdraw from the UN, then we should be asking Trump to withdraw from the UN Security Council and not from the other institutions. And we should also continuously be demanding for the reform of the UN, right? And the review of the charter, because then that is more meaningful. And that also applies to IFIs, and that was mentioned as well. And then also continuous knowledge building as our contribution as Oxfam. For AU ECOSOC, it was a very long list of their contribution, but let me just try and summarize it. So they committed to continue being a uniting force to make sure that our voices are amplified. They also talked a lot about how concerned they are that we until now have not concluded with the diaspora legal framework, and that this is something that has to be taken on in terms of operationalization and also making sure that there's linkage. And I think they committed that there's going to be operationalization of the national chapters of ECOSOC. But then also just not leaving it there, but making sure that that operationalization strengthens the local chapters and the local actors and uses the local experience to be the one that informs the global partnerships that are being created. And then they also had a list of activities and campaigns that will be running throughout the year and emphasize that those are not going to be only participated in by local actors, but by all the actors. And so, for example, the partnership, even if it's happening, a caravan is happening on the continent, they'll make sure that that caravan is bringing local actors to sub-regional, to continental, and the messaging also finds itself in the global spaces. So it was a list of activities, exciting activities. I wish I was on the continent. But that said, they're also bringing the discourse to the multilateral settings, including the fact that there's already plans to make sure that the reparation agenda that we're talking about becomes a huge agenda of the UN General Assembly when the UN this year commemorates the 80th anniversary. You know, it's UN at 80. UN at 80 where Africa is not represented. UN at 80 where the Africans remain victims of everything that the UN is doing. So they'll make sure that they mobilize us to go to the UN. In addition, they've continued with the partnerships with the Latin American and Caribbean colleagues. They have a partnership imaging and strengthening with the Africa, people to people, and China, including recognition that there's a growing Chinese diaspora, African diaspora in China that needs to be mobilized. So it's with the UN, the EU, with Latin America, but they're also taking it to the East. I will ask them, it was a long list, so I can't read everything. And then we also had the African Union 60th region, who have committed on a number of activities in the areas of advocacy, policy, strategy development, implementation. Their focus is a lot on technology. And one of the initiatives that they're doing is to identify tech billionaires that are working for the tech industry who have African heritage as a target in terms of resource mobilization and just funding some of the efforts around reparation and justice. And then providing expertise and also with the development of the database. So that was the first question. The second question revolves around the commitments that we did. So it talked about avenues for collaboration. So in terms of avenues, we recognized that we'll continue working and recognizing the leadership of ECOSOC. So we'll continue using AU ECOSOC as a platform or a vehicle for mobilizing and engaging policymakers and also convening amongst ourselves. And then we also said as an avenue, we'll continue establishing, but also where they don't exist, establishing, but where they exist, strengthening, various geographical platforms that brings us together. And then we'll also continue emphasizing the meaningful involvement of the 60th region, the diaspora, as an avenue for collaboration. And then we also, as an avenue for collaboration, said would continue participation in global moments and systematically and consistently doing so, where we don't just show up when the endorsements are happening, but we want to also show up when the negotiations are happening in a very systematic way, and also continuously engaging our member states and holding them accountable on a continuous basis. And then last but not the least, the activities and objectives, question 3. It was hard for us. So we thought we needed more time on this, but I said one of the things that we'll commit to doing on that is mapping. So the mapping of actors, the mapping of activities, the aligning of the actors, the activities and the responsibilities is what we want to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I think Group D and international partnerships is one of the thematic areas that at least concerns everyone in this room. That's why we're here, right? That's why we got the opportunity to convene here today, because we hope to continue to foster the partnership that already exists. So I'm happy and that they had such a vibrant conversation, and Brenda was able to share some of that with us, and hoping that in the future, in the coming months, we're able to concretize some of these points that were raised by that group, and just really take it beyond this room. I think we can actually just give ourselves a round of applause for staying till the end of the agenda. I want to thank you all for your time, and just to kind of, tee this off, I really would take some time to make this a call to action. We talk a lot, especially people in CSO spaces. We meet almost every year. Well, at least this is my first time in Addis, but we do meet every year. Some of you, it's, multiple times in Addis for decades now. And just to make sure we're not having the same conversations year in, year out. So a call to action that everything we've discussed, this roadmap, and I would appreciate if the QR code, can go up now. And this would be one of the first activities and one of the first actions that we can do. Lillian, if I could ask you to coordinate for Group A, and Cecil for Group, I missed the groups now, but, yeah, exactly. Group C and Brenda, and we lost Genevieve a bit, but I would be sure to tell her to coordinate and make sure that, this database is populated so that we can follow up. And if there is someone who is thinking of an activity and they're looking for partners, they're looking for resources, they're looking even just to chat, right? And have their talking points articulated, in a way that can give them the zeal and the kick to start something. I think this will be very good. So this is a QR code. Despite the logo, I will say that whereas Palu started this document, it is not Palu's document. It is our document. I think our IT and comms team back in Arusha are very enthusiastic about branding. But this is our document. I would really love for all of us in this room today to take ownership of it and just bring it together. So that because for generations to come, for many years to come, we've talked today for 5 years, the initial 5-year work plan. This is something that would go beyond 5 years. It's the initial starting point where we can articulate our activities, we can articulate our ideas. And I think we would be working very closely with Desiree and OSF to make sure that the partners who convened here today, get access to this and are able to populate it. I don't know if Prof has anything to add, to kind of summarize. Oh, you come up.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, just to thank Ruth again. Round of applause for her for doing a great job. All the old facilitators can now sit down and let the young ones take over. So some of you, you might be retired very soon. No, I'm joking. She said, no, we cannot retire. We have at least 10 to 15 years to contribute to this field. So we'll be there. But we will let her do the work because she does a great job. No, just to say thank you to all of you for making the time to come here, because this was a very last minute convening, rapid response. And Desiree is central, instrumental to this, because the idea popped in his head and he convened us on MS Teams. Some of you were able to make that meeting. And then from that meeting, the idea to convene in Addis this week was put on the table. It was agreed, and he also found a way to convince his people to cover the costs for this. Amani Africa was able to come to the party. Thank you, Amani Africa. Are you the last remaining Amani Africa peoples? Oh, sorry. Brooke is here. He's also Amani Africa. But thanks to Amani Africa, Dr. Solomon Derso, I think a lot of you know him, is a leader in our field. And we're just very happy that they were able to organize all of this. Huge turnout for lunch. I hope you all got enough. Food for thought. You see what I did? Yeah. I turned it, anyway, you know where I'm coming from. Just to say to you all, we need to raise awareness on this issue, and we need to work together, right? There's a lot to be done. If you can do short op-ed pieces, short piece, 800 words, not more, on anything that moves you around the theme of reparations, please do and publish posts. Social media, I know they are boycotting big tech because they're trying to control our brains. But there are other platforms. Please spread the word, raise the awareness. We have AU ambassadors in the room. Please help us to encourage our leaders to listen to the people, the grassroots. And it's a collective journey. And this is literally just a spark that's going to light the flame, hopefully. The flame that will burn and raise the spirit of the African people, and that will help us to get that acknowledgement as human beings that need to be treated with dignity around the world going forward. So that's my final comment. I think I will stop there before I do my stand-up routine. Desiree, are you going to say something as Open Society Foundations? On behalf of Desiree and Amani Africa, I want to thank you all again for taking the time to be here. Madam, sure, come here. You want to come here?
I just want to say something. In 2012, on September 21st, I went to a equinox ceremony in Chicago on the lakefront. It's the first time I've ever attended something like that. And it was with one of our Chicago elders, a great famous musician. And his name will come back to me now. But what he said to us that day was that we had moved into our time. And I really want you to hold on to this because I do data and sometimes it's very depressing. But when I remember him, I understand. So we said, what do you mean we moved into our time? He said that Africa will rise again. Phil Koran, that's his name, Phil Koran. Baba Phil Koran was also a cosmologist as well as a musician, right? And so he said, the way that the planets are aligning, you know, we just had those 6 planets lined up, right? Millions of years that never happened. So the planets' alignment do affect us. We're in the second, what they call Pluto return for the United States. Hence you see revolution coming, right? You see revolution globally. Okay. So Baba said, our time has come, Africa is rising. I said, Baba, what do I need to do? He said, nothing, just keep doing what you're doing. So all of you here, you were born for this time. So all of us here, this was already destined. You see? And you are going to be the part of the rise of the African. And I asked him, so when this going to happen? 2032 is a great conjunction. So when you see Traore and the Sahel, and they're rising up, and you see us here coming together, folks, we are here to usher in the African Renaissance. So I just wanted to say that in conjunction with what you're saying, that we must have hope. Remember, Baba said, we have moved into our time. So you're in your time, and you are here to do that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. A new Africa is upon us. But the new Africa is already in the room, actually. It's there. and it will spread. So, never underestimate the ability of one person. Please join him. Anyway, I think we will conclude there. SG, do you want to say something? You're good? Okay. Don. The Don.
Thank you very much, Tim. Just, I'm sorry, I was wafting in and out, so I didn't hear all of your presentation, Cecile, but I think one of the things that I had you highlighting was the need of emphasizing African languages, emphasizing their use, especially focusing on the ones that we are likely to lose. And just in case you didn't know, the AU actually does have a specialized agency for languages, the African Academy of Languages, ACALAN, which is based in Bamako in Mali. So I think part of what our plan of action should be to engage them and see what they're doing. And very importantly, to ensure that the AU gives them enough resources for that work, human resources, technical resources, financial resources. Because part of the bullshit that's happening with the bean counters in this city is this idea of one-person departments, where units are so lean in terms of human capacity that they can't meet the obligations. So maybe part of what we do is to see how we ensure that they're working and that they have what they need to do their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Well said. Anybody else is feeling moved by the Spirit or the spiritual journey that lies before us? You're all spiritual warriors now. You've been recruited, spiritual warriors for reparations. It's our time. You chose this timeline. So please, populate the document. Thank you. Bonne soirée, kwaheri, and please enjoy your events for the week and be inspired to continue this journey with us. Thank you.